By dawn, the blood full moon had lowered itself behind the trees and left the world ruined in its wake. The old barn stood at the edge of my mother's property, with one side of its roof split open to the early gray sky. Smoke curled from the broken boards in thin silver threads, not black, not the honest smoke of wood or hay or anything living that had burned clean. Silver. It clung to the air like frost and made every breath taste like metal. I stood in the grass with my arms hanging at my sides while everyone waited for me to scream. No one said that, but I felt it. Ruth stood behind me with one hand pressed to her mouth. Sonia stayed close enough that her shoulder almost touched mine, close enough to catch me if my knees gave out. Walter Grant leaned on a shovel he had not used yet, his hat low over his face. Miss Pearl and Gloria stood by the back fence, both of them silent for the first time in my memory. Miriam Price crouched near the barn door with a strip of cloth wrapped around her fingers. She reached toward the ash, then stopped before touching it. "Don't," she said sharply when Walter stepped forward. Walter froze. "I was only going to clear some of it." "Not with your hands." "It's ash." "No." Miriam's voice had gone low and hard. "It is not." My gaze moved to the place where Jonathan had been. There was nobody there. There should have been a body. I knew bodies. I knew death. I had carried foxes stiff from roadside ditches, lifted birds whose necks had snapped against glass, held dying raccoons while their claws opened and closed against my sleeves. Death had weight. Death left something behind. Jonathan had left a burned shape in the dirt and a silver stain across the barn floor. That was all. My mind refused it at first. It kept reaching for him in pieces. A hand. A lock of silver hair. The line of his mouth when he tried not to smile. The scar at his palm. The deep, torn sound of his voice when he had whispered my name beneath a red moon. But the ground held nothing soft. Only ash. Only smoke. Only absence. Sonia whispered, "Naima." I turned before she touched me. Not away exactly. Just enough. "I'm fine," I said. Her face changed. Those 2 words had always been a lie, but that morning they sounded like something worse. My mother came to me then. She had wrapped one of the porch quilts around her shoulders, though the cold did not seem to touch her. Her eyes were swollen, but she had not cried in front of me. Not yet. Ruth Bell had built a life out of not falling apart until everybody else was fed. "Baby," she said. "I need a garbage bag," I told her. Her brows drew together. "What?" "For the glass. On the porch." Nobody moved. The porch windows had blown out when the silver fire came. Shards glittered across the boards where Jonathan had stood last night, where he had braced himself between me and Patrick Cole's weapon, as if his body had ever been enough to stop fate. There was still blood near the steps. His blood. Dark against the wood, dried around the splinters. "I'll clean it," I said. Sonia stared at me. "You are not cleaning anything. It'll stain. Let it stain." I looked at her then, and whatever she saw in my face made her mouth close. I walked past them. The porch groaned beneath my boots. Every board remembered him. That was the cruelty of houses. They held footsteps after the person was gone. They kept chairs angled the way someone had left them. They kept cups, towels, shirts, pillows pressed into shapes that meant nothing and everything. I found the broom by the kitchen door. My hands knew what to do. Sweep the glass into a pile. Pick the larger pieces carefully. Fold the bloody towels. Wipe the porch boards. Rinse the cloth. Wring it out. Scrub again. The work kept my bones from understanding. Behind me, voices moved low through the yard. Walter had brought a metal bucket. Miriam made him pour the silver ash into it without touching it. When the first shovel scrape hit the barn floor, the sound went through my teeth. The ash hissed when it landed in the bucket. My mother flinched. I did not. Sonia came onto the porch and took the rag from my hand. I held on. "Naima," she said softly, "give it to me." I wasn't finished. Yes, you were. I kept my fingers tight around the damp cloth. There was still a smear in the grain of the wood. If I scrubbed hard enough, maybe the porch would stop remembering how he had fallen. Maybe the house would stop smelling like him. Maybe the world would stop having the nerve to continue. Sonia's voice broke. Please. That did it. Not the ash, not the empty barn, not the silver stain where Jonathan's body should have been. Sonia saying please like she was scared of me. I let go. She folded the cloth in her hands and pressed it against her chest. For one reckless second, I thought she might hug me. She must have thought better of it, because she only stood there with me while the morning widened around us. The sun rose weak and cold. People began leaving after there was nothing left to pretend they could do. Miss Pearl approached my mother first, moving slowly, her church shoes damp from the grass. "Ruth," she said, her voice stripped of all gossip and sharpness, "I put soup in your kitchen." My mother nodded once. Gloria touched my elbow as she passed, barely more than a brush. "We're close by, sweetheart." I almost thanked her. The words did not come. Walter boarded the worst of the porch window without being asked. He hammered each nail with careful force, like the wood had offended him personally. When he finished, he stood in front of me, turning his cap in both hands. "I can close up the barn," he said. "If you want." "No," he swallowed. "Naima." "Not yet." Walter looked toward Miriam. Miriam gave the smallest shake of her head, so he only nodded and stepped back. By noon, the yard had emptied. By evening, the barn was still open. The silver stain remained. My mother made food, too much food. Chicken, rice, greens, cornbread, tea sweet enough to make teeth ache. The kitchen smelled like butter and onions and survival. Sonia sat at the table without eating. My mother kept filling plates no one touched. I washed dishes because the sink was full. Ruth let me for exactly 5 minutes. Then she came behind me and turned off the tap. The sudden silence pressed against my ears. "Baby," she said. I stared down at my wet hands. "You do not have to be strong in this house." The words landed gently, and still they hurt. "I know," I said. She waited. I dried my hands on a towel, folded it over the oven handle, and walked upstairs before my face could betray me. Jonathan's room was at the end of the hall. My mother still called it the guest room, but that had stopped being true after the first night he slept there, and woke up looking stunned that peace had not killed him. I opened the door. His scent was everywhere. Cedar, smoke, rain, wild earth after a storm. Something warm beneath all of it that had been only him. His spare shirt hung over the back of the chair. The bed was made because he had made it that morning before going to his death. Neat and careful as if he had expected to come back and did not want to be rude. That almost destroyed me. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it. The room waited. His borrowed boots sat beside the dresser. A roll of bandages remained on the nightstand. The stupid Raptors hoodie Sonia had mocked him into wearing lay folded at the foot of the bed. I crossed the room and touched the shirt. My fingers sank into soft cotton. Ordinary. Impossible. I lifted it from the chair and pressed it against my face. The first sob came without sound. Then another. Then something tore loose inside me so violently I had to sink to the floor, clutching his shirt in both hands, biting into the fabric to keep my mother from hearing me break. My whole body shook with it. Grief moved through me like an animal trapped under my ribs, clawing for a way out. I did not scream. I gave it no voice. I cried until my throat burned, and my chest ached, and the room blurred into shadow. Then, beneath the smoke and cedar in the cloth, something changed. A warmth gathered against my mouth. I went still. The shirt pulsed once between my hands, weak, distant, alive, like a heartbeat answering from somewhere it should not have been. I stayed on the floor with Jonathan's shirt in my fists until the first gray seam of morning appeared beneath the curtains. The pulse did not come again. I waited for it anyway, holding my breath until my lungs hurt, pressing the fabric to my mouth as if I could force whatever had answered me to answer again. But the shirt only cooled in my hands. Cedar and smoke, rain and wolf, nothing more. By sunrise, I had convinced myself grief had become cruel enough to imitate hope. That was the only explanation I allowed. I folded the shirt and placed it back over the chair exactly as I had found it. My hands lingered on the cotton 1 second too long. Then I made the bed again, though it had not been disturbed, and opened the window because the room smelled too much like him. The cold air did not help. Downstairs, my mother had already started coffee. The kitchen light glowed gold against the dark windows, soft and ordinary in a way that felt almost obscene. Ruth looked up when I entered. She took in my clothes from yesterday, my swollen eyes, the careful set of my mouth. She did not ask whether I'd slept. "Sit," she said. "I have calls." Her hand stopped over the coffee tin. "Naima, there was a possum hit near the concession road last night. Somebody left a message." "That can wait." "It's freezing." "So are you." I reached for my keys on the counter. My mother moved faster than I expected. She put her hand over them and held them down. For a moment, we stood there on opposite sides of the counter, neither of us looking away. She had raised me with that look. It had stopped teenage arguments, bad boyfriends, and more than one reckless idea before breakfast. It did not stop this. "If I sit down," I said quietly, "I won't get back up." Something in her face cracked, but she moved her hand. I took the keys. The possum had died before I reached it. I still wrapped the body in a towel, still checked for babies in the pouch, still cleaned the blood from the roadside with bottled water, because some part of me could not stand leaving any living thing, or once living thing, abandoned under the open sky. After that, there had been a hawk with a broken wing near Chatham, 3 orphaned squirrels someone had kept in a shoebox beside a heater, and a skunk caught in a garden net behind a church where the pastor kept apologizing from behind a closed window. Work had weight. Work had sequence, gloves, carrier, sedation, wound wash, feeding schedule, intake form, clean bedding, heat lamp. Grief had no shape. Work did. So I gave my hands to things that could be fixed. By the 3rd day, I had scrubbed every cage in the rescue shed twice. By the 4th, I reorganized the medical cabinet until the labels faced the same direction. By the 5th, I drove to London for supplies we did not need, and came back with gauze, syringes, electrolyte powder, and 3 bags of feed already stacked in the shed. Sonia found me alphabetizing ointments. She stood in the doorway with 2 coffees, and a face that tried to be normal. "If you put the wound spray before the antiseptic because of brand name instead of purpose, I'm calling the government," she said. I kept arranging bottles. "It makes sense this way." "No, it makes serial killer sense." "Sonia." "Naima." I reached for a roll of vet wrap. She set 1 coffee down hard enough that the lid popped loose. "Look at me." I did. Her mouth tightened. Sonia Carter, who could talk through a fire alarm, who could flirt with paramedics while bleeding, who had once threatened a raccoon with legal action, stood there with nothing clever left. "You can be mad at me," she said. "You can cuss me out. You can throw something cheap. But you cannot keep walking around like this." "Like what?" "Like if you stop moving, you'll die." I laughed once. It came out wrong. Her eyes shone, but she did not let the tears fall. "That wasn't a joke. I have animals to care for. You have people trying to care for you." I didn't ask them to. "No," she said softly. "You never do." The words hit too close. I turned back to the shelf. She stayed there for a long time, coffee cooling between us. When she finally left, she did not slam the door. That was how I knew she was scared. Walter caught me 2 afternoons later behind his place, splitting wood I had no reason to touch. He had asked me to look at a fox den near the back field, and after I checked it, I found the axe leaning by the shed. The pile was there. My hands were empty. So I swung. The first log split clean. The second took 3 hits. By the time Walter came around the barn, my arms burned, and sweat had gathered beneath my collar despite the cold. "Naima Bell," he said. I brought the axe down again. The blade sank deep and stuck. Walter walked over, planted one boot on the chopping block, and closed his hand around the handle above mine. "That log has been dead longer than I've been retired," he said. "You can stop punishing it." I jerked the axe free. "I'm helping." "No, you're looking for something that won't cry when you hurt it." I rounded on him before I could stop myself. "You don't know what I'm looking for." His face did not harden. That made it worse. "No," he said. "I suppose I don't." The anger drained out of me so fast it left shame behind. I looked away. "Walter, I'm sorry." He took the axe gently from my hands. "I know." Those 2 words were worse than a lecture. That evening, a covered dish appeared on our porch from Miss Pearl. The next morning, Gloria left muffins. Miriam came by with a jar of salve and watched me too closely while I pretended to update feeding charts at the kitchen table. "You sleeping?" she asked. "Yes." "Lying is a sin. So is interrogating people before noon." Miriam almost smiled. Almost. Then her gaze dropped to my hands. The knuckles were scraped from cage doors, fence wire, wood, and my own refusal to stop touching things that could hurt me. She reached across the table. I pulled back. Her hand remained open between us. Busy hands do not mean a heart is healing, baby. My throat tightened. "I did not ask it to heal." The kitchen went quiet. From the stove, my mother made a small, wounded sound and turned away too quickly. I hated myself for that, but I still did not stop. The call came just after midnight, rain ticking hard against my bedroom window. A raccoon had been trapped in a drainage ditch off a service road, dragging one back leg and screaming whenever anyone came close. I dressed before the message finished playing. Ruth met me at the foot of the stairs in her robe. "No," she said. "I'll be careful." "That is not the same thing as staying alive." I kissed her cheek because I could not bear the fear in her voice. "I'll call when I'm done." The ditch smelled of mud, rusted water, and rot. My flashlight cut through the rain in a trembling cone. The raccoon had wedged itself beneath a collapsed grate, eyes reflecting green gold, teeth bared in terror. "Easy," I murmured, crouching low. I know it hurts." It took almost an hour to free it. By the time I slid the animal into the carrier, my jeans were soaked through, my jacket was smeared with mud, and my fingers had gone stiff from cold. The raccoon quieted under the towel, breathing fast but alive. Alive mattered. Alive was something. I drove home with the heater blasting and the carrier buckled into the passenger seat. North Buxton slept around me, windows dark, fields black beneath the rain. For a moment, as I turned onto my mother's road, I imagined headlights behind me. A black SUV, Patrick's gun, silver cutting through glass. There was nothing there, only my own fear following me home. I settled the raccoon in the rescue shed, cleaned its wound, started fluids, and washed the mud from my arms in the utility sink until the water ran brown, then pink from a scrape I had not noticed. Inside the house, everyone slept. I went upstairs without turning on the hall light. In the bathroom, I stripped off my wet jacket and braced both hands on the sink. My reflection looked back from the mirror with red-rimmed eyes and a mouth pressed too tight to tremble. Then I saw my fingernails. Silver ash packed beneath them. Not mud. Not dirt. Silver ash. My breath stopped. I scraped at it with my thumb. It smeared over my skin in a fine metallic streak and burned cold. A sound broke out of me before I could swallow it. I stumbled back, hit the door, and slid down to the floor. The bathroom tiles froze through my damp clothes. I clutched my hand against my chest and finally let the sobs come, ugly and breathless, tearing through the silence I had tried so hard to protect. I cried until I could not sit upright, until my forehead rested against my knees. Until exhaustion dragged me under with my hand still burning. Just before sleep took me, The darkness behind my eyes flashed white. No, not white. Silver. I woke up to the light. Not morning light. Not moonlight. Not anything that belonged to the living world. Silver stretched in every direction, bright enough to wound. It had no source and no mercy. It filled the air, the ground, the space where the sky should have been. There were no trees, no walls, no horizon. Nothing my mind could hold on to long enough to name. I stood barefoot on something that looked like glass and felt like winter. The cold went through my feet first, then climbed my bones. I looked down and saw nothing beneath me but more silver, depthless, and shining, as if I had been dropped into the inside of a blade. My breath came out in a white cloud. Hello? My voice did not echo. It disappeared. That frightened me more than an echo would have. An echo meant there was distance, a wall, a boundary. This place swallowed sound like it had been hungry for centuries. I turned slowly. The silver light pressed against my eyes until tears gathered. I lifted one hand to shield my face, and the moment my palm met the air, pain sliced across my skin. I gasped. A thin line of silver fire had opened over my lifeline. It burned cold. Not heat. Never heat. This was something sharper, more intimate. It felt like being cut by moonlight and kissed by frost at the same time. Then Jonathan screamed. My body moved before thought did. Jonathan! His name tore out of me, and this time the world answered. The silver beneath my feet rippled. Far ahead, a shape emerged inside the brightness. At first, it looked like a shadow trapped behind ice. Then it twisted, and the sound that came from it turned my blood to stone. I ran. The ground resisted with every step. It dragged at me like wet sand, though it looked smooth as a mirror. Silver light lashed at my arms, my throat, the side of my face. It did not cut deep enough to spill blood, but every touch carried the promise that it could. I kept running. The shape became a body, then a man, then a wolf, then Jonathan. He hung suspended in the silver air, his head bowed, his arms spread wide as if something had crucified him without wood or nails. Molten wires pierced his wrists, his ribs, his shoulders, his throat. More wrapped around his chest and vanished beneath his skin, glowing through him in cruel threads. His silver hair fell over his face in damp strands. His bare chest was scored with every wound I had ever seen, and countless more I had not. Some scars glowed red beneath the silver. Some had split open. Some bled light instead of blood. His body would not stay human. One moment he was the man I had touched, kissed, held. The next, white fur tore over his shoulders and his jaw lengthened with a growl of agony. His hands curled into claws, then back into fingers. The wolf inside him strained against the curse, and the curse punished both forms for existing. Jonathan, I whispered. His head snapped up. For one impossible second, his eyes found mine. Not silver, blue, alive. Then terror filled them. No, he rasped. I stumbled closer. I'm here. No. His voice broke around the word. Naima. No. The wires tightened. He convulsed, teeth clenched hard enough that I heard them grind. I reached for him. The air between us struck me. I flew backward and landed hard on the glass-bright ground. Pain burst through my hip and shoulder. Silver light crawled over my forearm like a living thing, searching for a way in. Jonathan made a sound that was almost a snarl. Do not touch her. The world shivered. I pushed myself up on one elbow. Who are you talking to? His eyes had gone wild, fixed on something beyond me. Wake up, he said. Naima, wake up now. I don't know how. You have to. I got to my knees. What is this place? His throat worked. The wire through it glowed brighter. What is left of me? The words struck harder than the fall. I shook my head. No. Yes. No, I saw you burn, I saw—" My voice failed, then came back sharpened by grief. There was nobody. There was nowhere for one to go. The silver around him pulsed. He swallowed a scream and lost it halfway. His back arched. The wolf tore through his skin and vanished again beneath the man. When he could speak, his voice had gone raw. The 100th death ended the circle. No rebirth. No next body. The curse had nowhere to send me, so it kept me. I stood slowly. Every instinct in me rebelled against the distance between us. Kept you where? His gaze held mine. Here. The silver light pressed closer, almost listening. Alive? I asked. A bitter, ruined smile moved across his mouth. Enough. The word was a knife. I took another step. Pain lit across my palm. I ignored it. Stop, he said. I am not leaving you here. Something moved behind him. At first it was only a darker shimmer inside all that brightness, a distortion where the silver seemed to bend around a figure not yet fully formed. The air grew colder. The light dimmed, not from mercy but from dread, as if even this place knew to make room. A woman stepped out of the silver. She was beautiful in the way old graves were beautiful beneath snow. Her hair streamed around her like black smoke underwater. Her gown might once have been white, but it had been dragged through ash, blood, and centuries of rage until no color remained except gray and silver. Her face looked young and ancient at once, smooth as carved bone, eyes bright with a grief too old to rot. Her hands were stained to the wrists, silver, not blood. Jonathan went utterly still. I knew her before he said her name. Eleanor, he breathed. The witch turned her head toward me. The pressure of her attention nearly drove me to my knees. So, she said. Her voice carried no echo either. It entered me like cold smoke. You were the tether. I lifted my chin. Let him go. Her mouth curved, but nothing in it resembled amusement. You came into a grave and mistook it for a doorway. I came for Jonathan. No. Eleanor moved one step closer to him. The silver wires brightened beneath her stained fingers, though she had not touched them yet. You came because he made you believe pain was romance. Jonathan's eyes closed. Do not speak to her. Eleanor ignored him. He has always been good at that, she said, wearing sorrow until women call it tenderness, bleeding pretty enough that someone reaches for him. Anger steadied me. He did not ask me to come. Her gaze sharpened. No, he would not. Martyrdom was the one crown he never laid down. Jonathan strained against the wires. Eleanor. She turned on him with sudden fury. Do not say my name as if you remember what it cost. The silver world cracked. A jagged sound split the air, and Jonathan screamed as every wire inside him pulled tight at once. His body bowed against nothing. Light poured from the old scars along his ribs. Stop! I shouted. Eleanor looked back at me. Leave him. No. The word left me before fear could soften it. Her expression changed. The grief remained, but something older rose beneath it. Something hungry. Something that had lived too long with vengeance as its only language. You think love makes you brave, she said. I took another step. My palm burned so fiercely my fingers shook. I think love makes me stay. Jonathan's eyes opened. They were wet with pain. Naima, please. That nearly undid me. He was not begging me to save him. He was begging me to abandon him. I shook my head. No. Eleanor lifted one silver-stained hand. The ground beneath me shattered. I fell through the brightness. Jonathan roared my name, and the sound followed me down, deeper and deeper, until the silver swallowed even him. I hit the bathroom floor with a gasp. Rain still tapped against the window. The house was dark. My wet clothes clung cold to my body, and my cheek was pressed against the tile where I must have fallen asleep. For one trembling second, I thought I was back. Then pain opened in my right hand. I rolled onto my side and looked at my palm. A fresh burn crossed the center of it, silver-edged and blistered, shaped like a thin wire pulled tight beneath my skin. Beneath the wound, faint but unmistakable, something pulsed once. Then again. By morning I had decided it had been a nightmare. Not because I believed it. Because belief would have required me to stand in my mother's kitchen and say Jonathan was burning somewhere no grave could reach, that a dead witch had spoken to me, that the silver mark across my palm had come from another world, so I called it a nightmare. I wrapped my hand in gauze before Ruth woke. I made coffee. I checked on the raccoon in the shed. I pretended my palm did not throb beneath the bandage with a rhythm that felt too much like an answer. The raccoon hissed when I lifted the towel from its carrier. "Fair," I murmured. I wouldn't trust me either. Its injured leg had swollen overnight, but the fluids had helped. It watched me with black, furious eyes while I changed the bedding one-handed. Pain lanced through my palm every time my fingers flexed. I dropped the syringe cap twice. The second time, Miriam Price's voice came from the doorway. "You always did hate asking for help." I closed my fist before turning. "Morning." She stood wrapped in a heavy gray coat, her hair tucked beneath a scarf, a jar of something dark and herbal in one hand. Her gaze moved from my face to the bandage. "What happened?" "Scraped it." "On what?" "Metal." "What kind?" I looked back at the raccoon. The sharp kind. Miriam did not laugh. That was when Ruth appeared behind her, still in house slippers, arms folded tight against the cold. She had followed Miriam out without a coat. "What is wrong?" my mother asked. "Nothing," I said. Miriam crossed the shed in 3 measured steps and held out her hand. I did not move. "Naima." There were very few people in North Buxton who could make my name sound like a commandment. Miriam was one of them. I unwrapped the gauze slowly. The burn looked worse in daylight. A raised silver line cut across the center of my palm, thin as wire and bright beneath the skin. The edges had blistered dark red. Around it, faint threads spread toward my fingers like the beginning of a map. Ruth made a sound that went straight through me. Miriam took my wrist carefully, not touching the wound. Her expression closed so completely, it frightened me more than if she had cursed. "That is not a scrape," she said. "I know." My mother stepped into the shed. "Naima Bell, you tell me right now." I wanted to lie. I wanted one more hour where grief stayed ordinary, where Jonathan was dead and I was broken, and nothing worse had to be true. But the burn pulsed beneath Miriam's stare. So I told them. Not well. Not cleanly. The words came in pieces while we sat at the kitchen table, the raccoon forgotten in the warm shed, and the coffee going bitter in the pot. Sonia arrived halfway through because Ruth called her and said only, "Come here," in a voice no one argued with. Sonia sat beside me. She did not make a joke. That was how I knew the room had changed. I told them about the silver place, about the ground like glass, about Jonathan hanging in the light with wires through his body and pain opening every scar he had ever earned. I told them how he had looked at me as if I were the danger, how he had begged me to wake up. Ruth pressed both hands over her mouth. Miriam closed her eyes. Sonia stared at the bandage in my lap. Her jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped near her ear. "And Eleanor was there," I said. The kitchen seemed to cool around her name. "She told me to leave him." Sonia finally spoke. "Did she touch you?" "No." Her eyes lifted. "Then what the hell is that?" I opened my hand. No one answered. Miriam rose from the table and walked to the sink. She braced both hands on the counter, looking out over the winter-bare yard toward the old barn. "Old curses do not always die when their purpose ends," she said. "Sometimes they rot. Sometimes they root. Sometimes they leave doors behind." Ruth's voice shook. "Doors to where?" "To whatever place the curse made to finish its work." I looked at the burn until the silver line blurred. He said the curse had nowhere else to send him. Miriam turned back. Her face had aged 10 years in one morning. If you reached him, she said, then some part of Jonathan remained tied to the living world. Not body, not ghost. Something between. The tether, I whispered. Miriam's eyes sharpened. In the dream, Eleanor called me that. Ruth gripped the back of a chair. No. Mom, no. She looked from Miriam to Sonia like one of them could make the world obey her. No, I know that look. I know all of your looks. You are not telling my child she has to go chasing a dead man through a witch fire. He is not dead, I said. The words startled even me. The room held them. I said them again, lower. He is not dead. Sonia swallowed. Can we get him out? Miriam did not answer quickly enough. Miriam, I said, hope can be holy, baby. Her voice had softened, which made it worse. It can also get you killed. Ruth turned away as if she had been struck. I reached for her, but she stepped back before I touched her. Not because she did not love me. Because she loved me so much she could not bear the shape love was taking. That night, I tried not to sleep. I brewed coffee strong enough to raise the dead and drank it black at my bedroom desk, while rain scratched at the windows. I left every lamp on. I kept Jonathan's shirt folded across my lap like a sin. My bandaged hand rested on top of it, the burn aching in slow, patient beats. Sonia texted me until after midnight. Are you awake? Yes, don't lie to me. I'm emotionally unstable and armed with snacks. I almost smiled. Almost. Downstairs, the house settled into its old sounds. Pipes knocking, floorboards sighing. Ruth moving once in the hallway, stopping outside my door, then leaving when I did not call out. At some point, the words in the book on my desk melted into black lines. My head dipped. I jerked awake. The room had gone silent. Not quiet. Silent. The rain had stopped against the glass. The furnace had stopped breathing through the vents. Even the old house seemed to be holding itself still. My reflection watched me from the dresser mirror. Only it was not mine. Eleanor Ashford stood behind the glass. Silver light bled from her eyes. I could not move. The air had thickened around me, cold and wet as river clay. My lamps flickered, each bulb dimming until the room glowed with the sick shine of moonlit metal. Eleanor lifted one silver-stained hand and pressed it to the inside of the mirror. The glass frosted beneath her palm. You were warned, she said. My throat tightened. You came into my room to repeat yourself? Her head tilted. In the mirror, her hair drifted around her face, though no wind touched it. He belonged to the curse before you knew his name. He belonged to himself before you stole that from him. The glass darkened at the edges. You know nothing of what he was. I know what you made him suffer. I made him remember. For 700 years? I stood slowly, Jonathan's shirt slipping from my lap to the floor. You had 700 years with him in pain. Do not call that love. Do not call that justice. The mirror shuddered. A crack opened near the frame. Eleanor's face twisted, and for one moment the beautiful mask broke. Under it lived something raw. Not dead. Not even old. A woman still standing in the exact second her world had ended. You speak of justice as if wolves ever left any behind. Then punish the man who wronged you, I said. Not every life he tried to build after. Her laugh was soft and terrible. You think those lives were his? The silver light sharpened. You hold one name in your mouth and think you have known him. Jonathan. Lover. Wolf. Wound. He has worn 99 graves beneath that pretty sorrow. You do not know what you're trying to steal. I am not stealing him. No? Her eyes burned brighter. Then what do you call reaching into a grave that was never yours? I call it refusing to leave him screaming. The mirror cracked again. This time the sound crossed the room and cut the bandage on my hand clean through. The gauze fell open. The burn flared silver. Eleanor saw it. Her expression changed. For the first time, fear moved through her rage. "He marked you." "No," I said. "You did. He burns everything he touches. He tried to save me. He burned my child before she had a name." The room dropped out from beneath those words. My anger faltered. Child. She had said child. Not pack, not home, not bloodline. Child. "What was her name?" I asked. Eleanor recoiled as if I had raised a blade. "Do not." "What was—" The mirror exploded inward. I woke up on the floor beside my bed, gasping, one arm thrown over my face. Glass glittered across the rug. The dresser mirror had cracked from corner to corner, but it had not shattered. Every fracture pointed inward toward a single silver handprint burned into the glass. Ruth's footsteps pounded up the stairs. Sonia's voice rang from below, panicked and furious. I sat up slowly, holding my bleeding hand against my chest. Outside, headlights swept across the bedroom wall. A car stopped in front of the house. By the time I reached the stairs, my mother had opened the door with Sonia behind her, holding a fireplace poker like she had been born for it. A woman stood on the porch in a black raincoat, wet hair clinging to her cheeks, a leather-bound journal clutched against her chest. Her eyes found mine before anyone spoke. "Naima Bell?" I gripped the banister. "Who are you?" "Claire Wexler." She looked past me toward the cracked mirror upstairs, as if she could smell the silver from where she stood. "If you saw him, then Jonathan Baker is not gone yet." Hope struck so hard I nearly missed the terror in her face. Claire tightened her arms around the journal. "But if we do this wrong," she said, "you will burn with him." Claire Wexler brought the storm in with her. Rain clung to her black coat and dripped from the ends of her hair onto my mother's front hall floor. She did not apologize for it. Her attention had already moved past Ruth's distrust, past Sonia's raised fireplace poker, past me standing on the stairs with blood soaking through the bandage on my hand. She looked toward my bedroom. "The mirror?" she asked. No one answered. I came down one step. Eleanor touched it. Claire's face tightened. Then we had less time than I hoped. That was how she entered our house. Not like a guest. Like bad news with a pulse. We ended up around the kitchen table before dawn, all of us too awake and too afraid to pretend otherwise. Ruth made coffee no one drank. Sonia sat close enough that her knee pressed against mine beneath the table. Miriam had wrapped my hand again with salve and clean gauze, but the silver burn still throbbed through every layer. Claire placed the journal in the center of the table. It was old leather, darkened by weather and handling. Its spine cracked, its corners burned. Not burned by ordinary fire. The damage shone faintly at the edges, as if silver still lived inside the scars. I knew it before she opened it. Jonathan. The ache that moved through me was so sharp, I had to put my uninjured hand flat against the table. Claire noticed, but she did not soften. He kept records when he could. Not in every life. Some were too short, some too violent, some he spent running. But pieces survived. She opened the journal. The first page was covered in Jonathan's handwriting. Not exactly the handwriting I had seen before. This version was older, more slanted. The ink faded brown-black. Still, something in the way the letters held themselves, careful, restrained, as if the hand that wrote them had been trying not to shake, made my chest tighten. At the top of the page was one name, Alaric Vale. My palm burned. I hissed and curled my hand against my stomach. Ruth stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. "Enough." "No," I said, though my voice came out rough. "Keep going." Claire turned to the page. Matthias Crow. The burn pulsed again. Elias Ward. Again. Lucian Marr. Again. Each name struck like a finger pressed into a wound. Sonia stared at the pages. "What are these?" "Anchors," Miriam said quietly. Claire nodded. Each of Jonathan's past lives had a name. The curse did not just kill him and remake him. It recorded him, bound him. Every life became a hook the silver could use to drag him into the next body. 99 lives, I said. 99 names. Claire's gaze met mine. When the 100th death came, the rebirth cycle broke. There was no next body waiting, so the curse collapsed around what remained. The silver between, I whispered. The room went still. Claire did not ask how I knew the name. She only turned another page. Most of the journal remained intact. Page after page held names, fragments of places, dates that did not always make sense. Black Forest, Rouen, London, Inverness, Boston. A battlefield in mud, a ship in ice, a room with no windows. Some entries ended mid-sentence, some were smeared with what looked too much like dried blood. But there were gaps, torn pages, burned spaces. Claire ran her finger down the ragged edge of one missing sheet. 74 names survived in the journal. 25 were torn loose. Where were they? Ruth asked. Claire looked around the kitchen, at the floorboards Jonathan had walked over, the back door he had carried firewood through, the window where he had once stood with moonlight on his shoulders. Wherever this life mattered. No one spoke after that. Not for a long moment. Then Ruth pushed back from the table. If there were pieces of that boy in my house, she said, voice shaking with fury and purpose, then we were not leaving them lost. By sunrise, North Buxton knew something was wrong. Not everything. Not the silver between. Not Eleanor Ashford. But enough. Walter arrived with his truck and his old work gloves. Miss Pearl came wearing church shoes and a rain bonnet, with Gloria behind her carrying a flashlight and a tote bag full of mason jars. Neither of them asked whether Jonathan had been human enough to save. He had fixed Walter's fence. He had eaten Ruth's food. He had stood on our porch and bled for me. That had been enough. We searched the guest room first. I had not gone back in since the night I held his shirt to my mouth and tried to cry quietly. Ruth stripped the bed herself, jaw tight, hands brisk until she lifted the mattress and saw the blackened corner of a page beneath it. She froze. I reached for it, but she shook her head and picked it up herself. The paper had not been there before. I knew it. Ruth knew it too. The name written across it was Samuel Rook. My mother held it as if it were a newborn thing. He slept above this, she said. Yes. Her eyes lifted to mine, shining but fierce. Then we got him out from under it. Outside, Walter found another page caught in fence wire where Jonathan had worked the day the dead crow appeared. The rain should have ruined it. Instead, the paper clung dry and unbent to the post. Walter handed it to me without looking directly at my face. Caleb Thorne. Don't know how paper survived 2 storms, he muttered. Claire took the page carefully. It wasn't only paper anymore. Walter looked toward the barn. His mouth worked once before he said, Boy never did know how to stay out of trouble. It should not have made me want to cry. It did. Sonia found one in her Raptors hoodie. She had left it over the porch railing after the barbecue, forgotten in the chaos of blood and silver and Patrick's gun. The hoodie still smelled faintly of smoke. When she shoved a hand into the front pocket, her sarcasm was already waiting. If your tragic wolf boyfriend stole my... Her words stopped. She pulled out the folded page. For once, Sonia Carter had no joke strong enough to stand between her and fear. The name was Julian Voss. She stared at it, then looked at me. It's warm. I took it from her. It was. By afternoon, the house had become a place of grim and holy disorder. Names lay across the kitchen table in careful rows. Claire counted each one twice. Miriam marked the floor with salt and iron shavings, not for the ritual yet, she said, but to keep Eleanor from listening too closely. Miss Pearl and Gloria searched the barn. I did not live this long to let a dead white witch bully me off Ruth Bell's property, Miss Pearl announced from beneath the hayloft, her voice muffled by dust. Gloria sneezed. Pearl, please do not antagonize the dead white witch. I will antagonize whoever needs antagonizing. They found 3 pages near the scorched place where Jonathan had vanished. No one touched the silver stain. Not even Claire. As the day wore on, every name felt heavier. I watched the rows grow and wondered which ones had laughed like him, which ones had killed, which ones had begged, which ones had loved someone and left her grieving beside Ash. I hated the jealousy when it came. Then I hated myself for it. Jonathan had lived 99 lives before me. None of them had saved him. None of them had kept him. That did not make them less real. It only made the table look more like a graveyard. At dusk, we were missing one name. The house had gone quiet with exhaustion. Sonia sat on the floor with her back against the cabinets. Walter stood by the door, arms crossed. Ruth moved upstairs again, though there was nothing left to search. A minute later, I heard her call my name. I found her in Jonathan's room, kneeling beside the bed. She had pulled up one loose floorboard beneath the chair where his shirt still hung. A page rested in the dark hollow below. I knew before I touched it that it was the last. The name was Nathaniel Ashe. The silver burn in my hand flared so brightly it shone through the gauze. Downstairs, Claire counted the final page. 99, she said. No one celebrated. The air in the kitchen had changed. It felt crowded, as if all those names had brought their dead with them. Claire opened the journal again. Now that the names are gathered, the binding should reveal the condition. The what? Sonia asked. Claire slid her thumb beneath the torn lining of the back cover. The leather split with a wet sound. A hidden strip of parchment loosened and fell onto the table. The handwriting was not Jonathan's. It was elegant, cruel, familiar in a way that made the cracked mirror upstairs seem suddenly closer. Claire read aloud. The living tether must enter willingly. The dead wolf must choose freely. The mother must name what was denied. My breath left me. Ruth turned toward me. No. I heard Eleanor's voice again, low and broken in the mirror. He burned my child before she had a name. Miriam crossed herself. Claire looked at me. Naima, if you entered the silver between once, it may try to keep you the next time. Ruth's voice sharpened. She was not entering anything. I looked down at the 99 names spread across my mother's table. Pieces of him. Proof of him. 100 lives of pain ending in one place I could still reach. I said. My mother closed her eyes. Before she could answer, something snapped outside. Every head turned toward the kitchen window. Beyond the glass, the yard lay black beneath the trees. For 1 second, I saw nothing. Then a small red ember glowed in the tree line. A man stood there, half hidden by branches and rain-dark bark. Silver wire looped around one gloved hand. Patrick Cole smiled into the dark. His voice carried softly across the yard. Still not dead, Baker?
I had forgotten darkness. The silver between allowed no night, no shadow deep enough to hide inside, no mercy of closed eyes. Even when I forced my lids down, the light remained. It burned through skin, through bone, through memory. It was not brightness as the living knew it. It was silver stripped of metal and made into weather. It filled my mouth when I tried to breathe. It ran beneath my skin in molten threads. It kept me awake. It kept me whole enough to suffer. The wires held me where the curse had left me, suspended in a place with no sky and no ground worth trusting. They pierced my wrists, my ribs, my throat, my chest. They did not simply bind, they listened. Every movement, every thought, every flicker of defiance drew them tighter. When I shifted, they shifted with me. Man became wolf, became man again, each transformation tearing through wounds that never closed. Fur split into flesh, claws broke back into fingers. My jaw lengthened around a scream and then returned human before the sound ended. The curse had taught me too well. It knew every shape I had ever worn. It punished all of them. Death would have been clean. This place was not death. It was what remained when death had been denied its own conclusion. I did not know how long I hung there after Naima vanished. Time had no spine in the silver between. It bent, it circled, it opened its mouth and fed me centuries I had already survived. I burned in the same moment I remembered freezing. I screamed in the same breath I remembered drowning. The curse did not let me possess even my memories in order. It gave them back like knives. The Black Forest came first, though first meant nothing. Snow under paws, blood steaming over pine needles. Men shouting in a language I no longer used but still understood when they begged God to let me die. Silver hooks in my flank, fire in my lungs. Then London. Not the London Naima knew from maps and photographs. An alley slick with filth and rain. A woman sobbing my name, one of my names, as I tried to crawl away from her so she would not see the flames take me. Matthias, no. Elias, no. The names slipped over each other like bodies in a grave. I had been Alaric beneath a red moon. Samuel in a chapel with a broken bell. Caleb on a farm that smelled of wheat and smoke. Julian with blood on my cuffs. Nathaniel with my hands chained behind me and silver poured across my tongue. The curse remembered every version of me. It did not remember mercy. When the memories grew too sharp, I tried to hold on to the last life. Jonathan Baker, Ruth's kitchen warm with cinnamon and fried onions, Walter's fence under my hands, Sonia's voice cutting through fear with some wicked remark meant to keep Naima from crying. Naima on the porch, close enough that I could feel her breath before I kissed her. Naima. The wires in my throat flared. I bit down until my teeth cracked and healed and cracked again. I had learned quickly that the curse liked her name best. It found all the soft places I had never meant to show. It pressed silver there and waited for me to break. I had broken often. I would have broken forever if it kept her away. A sound moved through the light. At first I thought it was another death arriving. The silver between had many voices. Hunters, priests, lovers, men I had killed, women I had failed, children crying from houses that burned because an alpha had chosen war over caution. Then I heard the shape of the breath before the word, Naima, not screaming, reading. Alaric Vale. The name struck the silver between like a bell. The wire through my left wrist loosened. I dropped half an inch and nearly tore myself apart on the others. A sound left me that no living throat should have made. Silver poured from the wound, bright and cold, and beneath it something long buried shifted. Alaric Vale. I remembered a hand gripping a sword hilt slick with rain. I remembered hunger. I remembered being young enough to believe a curse had an ending if one fought hard enough. Then that memory shattered and another rose in its place, not ancient, not blood-soaked. Ruth's kitchen, steam on the windows. Naima standing at the sink with her sleeves pushed up, arguing with Sonia about whether raccoons had personalities or criminal intentions. Sonia had said, if it has little hands and no respect for property law, it knows exactly what it's doing. Naima had laughed. I had been seated at the table with a mug between my hands, pretending not to watch her. She had turned then as if she felt my gaze and crossed the room without ceremony. Her hands had taken my face, warm, sure, no fear, no wrongness in her eyes when she looked at me. For 1 second in the silver between, I felt her thumbs brush my cheek. For 1 second I remembered what it was to be touched without pain following. Then the curse noticed. The wires snapped tight. Silver fire flooded my ribs. I screamed until my voice tore open and kept screaming after there was no voice left. The wolf inside me threw itself against my bones. It wanted to answer her, to run toward the warmth in the dark, to tear the silver apart and follow that sound back to her if it had to chew through me to do it. I forced it down. No, not her, never her. The light ahead of me folded inward. Eleanor stepped from it as if the silver between were a room in her own house, and I were something she had left hanging for later. She looked unchanged and ruined all at once. The same dark hair drifting as though submerged, the same silver stains covering her hands. The same grief beneath the cruelty preserved so perfectly it had become another kind of corpse. She found one, Eleanor said. I lifted my head with effort. Leave her. How quickly you beg when it is not your own flesh at risk. I did not beg. No. She moved closer, the hem of her gray gown trailing over nothing. You burned. You endured. You wore suffering like nobility and called it repentance. The wire through my throat pulsed. I smiled despite the pain. It must have looked like a dead thing trying to remember hunger. I stopped asking you for mercy centuries ago. Eleanor's eyes sharpened. And yet you keep looking at her like she is proof you deserve it. The words found their mark. I hated that they did. The silver between had stripped me of many vanities. Pride had burned early, hope later. But guilt had remained. Guilt had survived every pyre, every rebirth, every moon that dragged me toward another ending. Eleanor had built the curse out of it. My guilt had been the mortar between the stones. Naima had touched that guilt and not worshipped it. She had not forgiven me for things she did not understand. She had not made my suffering beautiful. She had simply looked at me as if I were still allowed to stand in a room, drink coffee, carry wounded animals, kiss her like morning might come. Eleanor circled me slowly. She will come, she said. No. She already has. She crossed once. She bled for it. The burn on Naima's palm flashed through me as if it were mine. My body jerked against the wires. Eleanor watched with terrible satisfaction. There, that is the sound of the tether. I will sever it. You cannot. I will make her afraid of me. She has seen you burning and still reached. Then I will not answer. Eleanor leaned close enough that the silver in her eyes reflected my own agony back at me. You never could resist being loved by the doomed. The wolf snarled inside my chest. I closed my hands into fists around the wires in my wrists. They sliced deep. Silver ran over my fingers. The pain cleared one narrow path through the madness. Naima will live, I said. Eleanor's mouth trembled before it hardened. No one touched by you ever does. I would have answered. I would have hated her better if the silver between had not shifted again. Another name came. Not from Claire, not from Ruth or Miriam or any hand that had opened the journal. Naima's voice carried through the burning white, rough with exhaustion and grief. Nathaniel Ashe. The last name I had worn before Jonathan tore through me. The wire at my throat cracked. Air rushed in. Real air. For the first time since the 100th death, I smelled rain. Ruth's house. Wood smoke. Coffee gone bitter in a pot. Sonia's fear wrapped in anger. Miriam's herbs, salt, iron, Naima. Under it all, faint and hated, came another scent. Hunter's oil, silver wire, Patrick Cole. The wolf surged so violently that my bones bowed around it. No. I clamped my teeth together. I swallowed her name. I tried to bury every answer beneath pain and silence and 700 years of learning how to endure. Then Naima cried out through the tether. Jonathan! Her voice broke in fear, not for herself, for me. The wolf inside me rose past every command I had ever given it. I tried to hold it back. I failed. It answered her with a howl that split the silver between open. The crack my howl made did not open into North Buxton. It opened backward. For one breath I smelled rain on Ruth Bell's porch and the iron tang of Naima's blood beneath clean gauze. I felt the living world pull against me, impossibly thin, impossibly warm. Then Eleanor drove both silver-stained hands into the wound in the light and tore it wider in the wrong direction. No, I said. My voice was barely sound. She looked at me with eyes bright enough to blind. You do not get to call for her and hide from what made you mine. The silver between folded. The wires in my body dragged me down through brightness, through burning, through the screams of all my dead names, and then the cold struck. Mud closed around my boots. Rain hit my face. Smoke covered the moon. I knew the place before the memory finished building itself around me. Ashford Land. 700 years gone and never gone at all. In that first life I was Alaric Vale. Alpha of wolves, too young, too hungry, too cornered by men who had learned that silver did not only kill us, it frightened us. It made beasts of us before the killing even began. The manor stood below the ridge, half-timbered and old, its windows lit gold against the black. Beyond it, Eleanor's tithe barn sagged under the weight of rain. Harrow's men had stacked silver-shot barrels inside it, enough cursed metal and pitch to burn through a den and everything breathing in it. My pack waited in the trees behind me. Not warriors, not only warriors, mothers with pups pressed under their coats, boys with shaking hands around rusted blades, old wolves who should have been sleeping beside hearth fires instead of crouching in mud while horses stamped and human soldiers laughed below. My beta stood at my shoulder. "If we wait until dawn," Thomas said, "we lose the den." I remembered the weight of the bow in my hand. I remembered Eleanor climbing the slope toward me, skirts soaked to her knees, one hand braced beneath the roundness of her belly. She was young then, not soft. Eleanor had never been soft, but alive in a way the silver between had long since burned from her. Her hair was braided beneath a hood. Her healer's satchel knocked against her hip with every desperate step. "Alaric," she called. The memory always used that name. I hated hearing it from her. I had met her first over a fever bed when 2 of my youngest wolves had been dying of silver sickness, and no pack remedy would touch it. Eleanor Ashford had come into our den with human herbs, witchcraft in her blood, and enough courage to make every wolf there ashamed of baring teeth at her. Later, I had seen her set the broken arm of a human boy whose father had carried a wolf pelt over one shoulder. She had healed whoever lay bleeding in front of her. That had been her crime. War did not forgive the unchosen. "They are using your barn," I told her in the memory. "I know." Rain ran down her face. Her breath smoked in the cold. "Give me 1 hour. We do not have 1 hour. My people are in that house. So are their weapons." "Servants," she said, stepping closer. 2 stable boys, my aunt, a girl from the village whose fever broke this morning. They came to me because they thought a healer's roof still meant sanctuary. Behind me, a wolf pup whimpered. Below us, one of Harrow's soldiers lifted a torch and turned toward the barn doors. Thomas swore softly. Eleanor saw my face change. "No," she whispered. I did not look at her belly, and I could not. If I looked, I would have seen exactly what my choice would cost before I made it. "Move your household out through the east passage," I said. Harrow's men blocked it. Then the cellar. "The cellar door opens toward the yard. There is no other way. There is always another way when it is not your blood paying for it." Her words had been true. That was the worst of it. I had held command for too many years to pretend mercy was always possible. Sometimes mercy for one body meant slaughter for 20. Sometimes an alpha measured lives like stones in his hand and chose which ones to drop. I had told myself that was duty, and I had told myself many things before the curse taught me honesty. In the memory, I raised my hand. Eleanor reached for me. Her fingers closed around my sleeve. "Alaric, please." I gave the signal. A flaming arrow cut through the rain. It struck the barn roof and vanished. For a moment, nothing happened. That was the part the silver between loved most. The waiting, the tiny mercy before consequence. Then the barn opened like the mouth of hell. Silver fire blasted outward, white and blue and screaming. Horses broke loose. Men burned where they stood. The manor windows shattered inward. Flame ran across wet wood as if the rain were oil. Eleanor screamed, not in rage, not yet. She screamed like a woman watching her life become ash while her hands were empty. I ran then. Too late, as men always ran when guilt finally caught them. My wolves poured down the ridge behind me, and Harrow's soldiers turned their silver blades toward us. I tore through flesh. I broke throats. I killed everything between me and the house. The manor roof collapsed before I reached the door. The memory shifted, as it always did, to the worst room. Eleanor knelt in smoke near the hearth, gown torn, one hand pressed between her thighs, the other curved over her belly. Blood spread beneath her in a dark pool that the silver flames would not touch. Her aunt lay dead beside the settle. The fever girl did not move. The unborn child was already gone. I had known it before Eleanor looked up. Her eyes had asked me to deny it. I could not. The silver between snapped me back into my hanging body with such force that the wires ripped deeper through my wrists. Eleanor stood before me, no longer young, no longer rain-soaked. The witch of ash and silver watched the memory burn out behind her. "Again," she said. "No." Her mouth trembled. "Again." The world lurched. The ridge rebuilt itself. Rain returned. The manor stood whole. The barn waited with its belly full of silver. She could not stop touching the wound. That was what 700 years had made of her grief. Not healing, not justice. A finger pressed again and again into torn flesh because pain was the only proof that love had once lived there. I endured the memory a second time, then a third. By the fourth, I stopped fighting the wires and watched Eleanor instead. Each time the arrow flew, she did not look at me. She looked toward the house. Each time the roof collapsed, her hands curled protectively around an absence. Each time the room with the hearth returned, she did not weep. Not once. "You think if I watch it enough it will change," I said when the silver between hauled me back again. Eleanor's face hardened. "I think if you suffer enough, the world might remember her. The curse has not remembered her. It has only remembered me." Silver flashed across her hands. I forced my head up. "That is why you cannot let her have a name." The light went still. For the first time since Naima had touched the silver between, Eleanor looked truly afraid. "Do not speak of my child. She was more than the fire. Do not. More than what I did." Her silver eyes burned brighter. I felt the name then, not heard, not learned, felt. It pressed against the back of my tongue from somewhere beneath the curse, soft and old and buried under 700 years of vengeance. A name Eleanor had carried and never given to the world. A name grief had swallowed before breath could bless it. "Abel," Eleanor struck me. The silver wire through my throat snapped tight enough to choke the sound in blood. Another strand drove through my mouth, burning across my tongue. I convulsed against the bindings, half wolf, half man, unable even to scream properly. She stood close, shaking with rage. "You have no right." Blood and silver filled my mouth. No, I had no right. But Naima had been right too, though she had spoken the truth from the other side of glass. 700 years with me in pain had not been love. It had not been justice. It had been a grave refusing to close. Eleanor leaned toward me. "If she comes here, I will show her every life you destroyed. I will show her the beast beneath the man she mourns." I thought of Naima's hands steady over wounded animals. Naima sitting on Ruth's floor with my shirt pressed to her mouth so no one would hear her breaking. Naima looking at my monstrousness and seeing not innocence, never innocence, but something still worth calling back. "She already knows enough," I rasped. "No one ever knows enough." Then her head turned. So did mine. A voice moved through the silver, not memory, living breath. Naima. Matthias Crow. The name rang clean through the burning white. One of the wires around my right wrist fractured, not loosened, cracked. The sound was small, almost delicate, and more terrifying than any scream the silver between had ever made. Eleanor stared at it. I stared too. Pain rushed through the fracture, but beneath it came warmth. A thread, a pulse. Ruth's kitchen, Sonia's fury, Miriam's salt. Claire Wexler's voice turning old curse marks into instructions. Walter's boots on wooden boards, pages spread across a table like bones waiting to be named. Naima had gathered them, all of them. The realization should have brought hope. Instead it hollowed me. Because if she had the names, she had the path, and if she had the path, she would come. Eleanor's fear slowly became a smile. "Your tether has teeth," she whispered. I pulled against the cracked wire until silver split my skin to the bone. "Naima," I tried to say through the blood in my mouth. "Stop." The silver between drank the warning. Naima read another name. The crack in my wrist widened, and a thin seam of darkness opened in the endless white. Beyond it, impossibly far away, I saw the old barn on Ruth Bell's land, waiting beneath a red and swollen moon. I saw North Buxton through a wound in the world, not clearly. The silver between did not grant mercy so cleanly. It let the living world come to me in pieces, each one sharp enough to cut. A sound first, rain striking tin. Then the smell of wet soil, cedar smoke, old wood, coffee gone bitter in a pot. Then color, dark and red and gold, trembling beyond the seam Naima's voice had made. The old barn on Ruth Bell's land stood beneath the swollen moon. It should not have mattered to me. I had seen castles fall, cities burn, churches fill with smoke, and wolves die screaming beneath saints painted on ceilings. One barn in North Buxton should not have had the power to break what remained of me. But it did, because I knew the grain of those boards. I knew the patch in the roof Walter had cursed at before I climbed up and fixed it. I knew the place near the door where Naima had stood with her hands on her hips, telling me that if I kept lifting things while wounded, she would sedate me like an uncooperative raccoon. The memory almost made me laugh. The wire through my throat made sure I did not. Another flash came. Ruth's kitchen. She sat at the table with both elbows planted on the worn wood and her hands clasped hard beneath her mouth. A Bible lay open in front of her, but she was not reading. Her eyes were closed, her shoulders squared, and she prayed like a woman prepared to argue until heaven gave her what she demanded. "Lord," she whispered, "I am asking nicely because I was raised right, but do not mistake me." A candle burned beside her untouched coffee. My chest tightened around the silver driven through it. No mother had prayed for me in centuries. Not like that. Not as if I had become something more than a man who had brought danger to her door. Ruth Bell had looked at what I was, at what followed me, at the blood I had left across her porch, and still she had fed me. Still she had called me boy with that fierce warmth in her voice, as though age and monstrosity meant nothing compared to whether I had eaten enough. The silver between shook. Eleanor stood nearby, watching the same vision with her silver-stained hands folded before her. "How sweet," she said, "a mother praying over a grave she has not seen yet." I pulled against the wires. They punished the movement at once. Silver peeled through my wrists and ribs, liquid light sliding beneath my skin. I swallowed the pain because there had been a time when pain had been the only language left to me. That time should have ended when Naima touched my face. It had not. Not yet. The tether shifted again. Sonia came into view, standing in Ruth's pantry with a cast-iron skillet in one hand and a tire iron in the other. Her hair had been tied back carelessly, her jaw tight enough to ache. On the shelf beside her were salt canisters, kitchen knives, a flashlight, and one of Walter's old hammers. Claire Wexler stared at the collection. I told you iron helped. I did not tell you to empty the tool shed. Sonia lifted the skillet. If ancient murder magic can be defeated by cookware, I intend to be overqualified. Her voice snapped the way it always had, bright and sharp, but fear lived underneath it. I could hear it. I could smell it even through the tether, bitter as burnt sugar. She was terrified for Naima, and because she could not make that terror vanish, she armed herself with jokes and blunt objects. I had known warriors with less courage. Another glimpse. Walter Grant's truck sat sideways across the road leading toward Ruth's property, its tires sunk deep in mud, headlights glaring into the rain. Walter stood beside it in his old canvas jacket, cap pulled low, shotgun resting in the crook of his arm like an accusation. Miss Pearl and Gloria sat in the cab with binoculars and a thermos between them. Nobody gets up this road unless Ruth says, Walter muttered. Miss Pearl lowered the window. And nobody gets past me unless the Lord himself comes down with identification. Gloria sighed. Pearl. What? I said what I said. The tether warmed around those words, absurd and human and stubborn. I had not understood until then. Not fully. I had spent lifetimes belonging to packs, to wars, to curses, to graves dug before I reached them. I had been alpha, prisoner, weapon, monster, legend. Men had knelt to me, men had hunted me. Women had touched me in darkness and whispered names I no longer wore. But I had never had this. A kitchen where someone prayed with anger because fear alone was not enough. A friend who made jokes while preparing to fight something older than her country. An old man who blocked a road because I had fixed his fence and bled on his land. A village that did not understand all of me and had decided somehow that understanding was not required before loyalty. Home. The word did more damage than the silver. Eleanor saw it enter me. Her expression softened in the wrong way. Pity from her had always been more dangerous than rage. There, she whispered. Now you know what she will lose. I closed my eyes, but the tether had already pulled me onward. Miriam Price worked inside the old barn, her hands steady as she poured salt and iron filings into a wide circle scored into the boards. Herbs smoked in small clay bowls around her feet. Rosemary, rue, hyssop. Things meant to cleanse, protect, call back. Claire knelt near the silver stain in the floor without touching it, translating marks that burned black whenever her finger passed too close. The names go here, Claire said. Not outside the ring. Not in Naima's hands once the door opens. If she carries them too far in, the curse may take them from her. Miriam's mouth tightened. Then we do not let it. You cannot argue with a realm made of silver fire. Miriam looked up. Baby, I argued with hospital administrators for 32 years. Silver fire can wait its turn. The barn breathed with candlelight and storm wind. Every flame bent toward the center of the circle as though the silver between had begun to inhale. Then I saw Naima. Everything in me went still. She stood near the barn doors with the 99 pages gathered against her chest. Her brown fingers held them carefully despite the bandage across her palm. Rain had dampened the ends of her hair and darkened the shoulders of her coat. Her face carried exhaustion like a bruise no one else could see, but her eyes were steady. Too steady. I knew that look. I had seen it in her when she approached wounded animals that still had teeth. Calm not because she felt no fear, but because fear had become irrelevant beside what needed doing. No, I breathed. The wire in my throat dragged the word into blood. Naima did not hear me. Or she did. Her head turned slightly as if something had brushed the edge of her awareness. For one mad second I thought she looked straight through the seam and saw me hanging there in the burning white. Her lips parted. Eleanor moved closer to my side. "She will come," she said, "and you know what waits for women who love cursed men." I did. God help me, I did. London rain, a woman's hands slipping from mine as hunters closed in. A frozen river, a red scarf caught beneath ice. A chapel where a bride had found only ash at the altar. The silver between gave me all of them at once. Every love that had become mourning. Every warmth the curse had later fed into flame. It pressed those memories into me until Naima's face stood among them, until I saw Ruth's porch empty again. Sonia silent, Ruth's kitchen with one less prayer strong enough to speak aloud. Eleanor's voice lowered. "Love always becomes a grave with you." For a moment I believed her. That was the cruelty of it. Not that she lied, but that she used truth until it became a weapon. I had ruined lives, I had brought hunters, curses, fire, I had been loved and left ashes behind. Naima should have lived a long, ordinary life, rescuing broken-winged birds and swearing at raccoons and coming home to a house where grief did not wait in the corners. She should have forgotten me. The thought entered me like surrender. Then Patrick Cole stepped out of the rain. The tether convulsed. He came from the side of the barn, coat black with water, silver wire looped around one gloved fist. In his other hand he held a narrow weapon etched with hunter's marks, a spike and blade both, made for cutting what ordinary metal could not see. No one inside had heard him yet. I did. I smelled him through Naima's blood. Hunter's oil, gunpowder, cold iron, silver prepared with prayer and hatred. Patrick smiled at the circle as if he had found something tender enough to crush. "Naima!" I tried to shout. Nothing crossed. He struck the outer line. Silver wire snapped across the salt and iron. Candles blew sideways. One of Miriam's bowls shattered. The ritual circle split open in a jagged black wound, and Naima cried out as the tether inside my chest tore nearly in half. Pain had been my world for 700 years. This was worse. This was not pain given to me. This was Naima being taken. The silver between roared. Eleanor laughed once, breathless and triumphant, but I no longer looked at her. I no longer looked at the wires as commandments. I no longer accepted the hooks through my body as debt I was obligated to pay. All my lives I had endured. I had mistaken endurance for penance and penance for justice. But Naima was not my punishment. She was not another grave waiting for my name. She was the life I had been too afraid to want. The wolf rose inside me, not as curse, not as moon madness, but as the oldest surviving part of my will. I wrapped both hands around the silver wire buried through my chest. It burned through my palms to the bone. I pulled. The silver between screamed with me. Eleanor's face changed. "Jonathan, do not!" It was the first time she had used that name like it mattered. I pulled harder. Wires tore from my ribs. Silver fire spilled out of me in sheets. My body tried to shift and failed and shifted anyway, bones breaking into wolf and back into man between one heartbeat and the next. The seam to North Buxton widened, showing Ruth raising her shotgun, Sonia lunging with the skillet, Naima staggering at the edge of the broken circle with the name still clutched to her chest. Patrick turned toward her. I gave the curse everything it had failed to take. Not to escape, not to be forgiven, to reach her. "Naima," I said into the silver light. The silver between opened.
By dusk, the storm had lowered itself over North Buxton like something with teeth. Rain beat against the old barn roof in uneven bursts, hard enough to rattle loose nails and make the candles tremble before Miriam had even lit them. Wind pushed through the gaps in the boards and carried the smell of wet earth, scorched wood, and the faint metallic sting of silver ash sealed inside 6 glass jars along the wall. I had not wanted to come back into that barn. My body remembered what my mind tried to organize into purpose. The blackened boards near the center, the silver stain Miriam had circled but refused to touch, the the place where Jonathan had burned without leaving me even enough to bury. I stood in the doorway with 99 names pressed to my chest and felt my grief open one eye. Ruth's hand found my back. "You breathe," she said quietly. "I am." "No, baby. You standing. That ain't the same thing." I drew air in until it hurt. Across the barn, Miriam knelt with a bowl of iron filings, salt, and crushed herbs beside her. Her gray braids had been tied back, and she moved with the grim precision of a woman setting bones before the pain could talk her out of it. Claire Wexler crouched near the silver stain, spectacles low on her nose, reading Eleanor's old curse marks from Jonathan's journal. "The circle has to close before the moon clears the clouds," Claire said. "If Patrick damages it before then don't say his name like you inviting him in," Sonia snapped. She stood near the north door, holding Ruth's cast iron skillet in both hands. A tire iron leaned against the wall behind her. She had changed out of her work clothes into boots and an old hoodie, as if she expected to fight a curse and then complain about the laundry afterward. Claire glanced at the skillet. "That is not a ritual instrument. It will be if I hit somebody hard enough. Under any other sky, I might have laughed." Instead, I looked down at the names. Some were written in Jonathan's hand. Some had burned into the pages in Eleanor's sharp script. Some had appeared only when Claire rubbed ash across blank parchment and whispered words that made the air taste like old pennies. Alaric Vale, Matthias Crow, Nathaniel Ashe, Samuel Reed, Caleb Wren. Men he had been. Men the curse had killed. Men who had loved and lost and died inside silver fire, so Jonathan Baker could stand on Ruth's porch one impossible evening and kiss me like he was afraid of wanting morning. My bandaged palm throbbed. Miriam looked up. "Naima." I stepped forward. Ruth's hand slid from my back, but she stayed close enough that I could feel her presence, like a wall against the dark. The barn had filled with people who should have been home behind locked doors. Walter blocked the road with his truck. Miss Pearl and Gloria watched from the cab with binoculars, walkie-talkies, and enough righteous nerve to shame a militia. Sonia guarded one door, Ruth guarded me. Claire guarded the instructions, Miriam guarded the line between life and whatever waited beyond it. Jonathan had thought he had no home. He had been wrong. Miriam pointed to the circle she had cut into floorboards around the silver stain. "Place the names along the inside edge. One at a time. Do not let your blood touch them unless I tell you." "My blood?" Claire's expression tightened. "The tether runs through you. Blood strengthens doors. It also feeds them." Sonia made a low sound. "I am once again objecting to this entire plan." "Noted," I said. "No, I need it written down." Sonia Carter objected before the supernatural nonsense got worse. Ruth did not smile. Her eyes stayed on my face. "If anything feels wrong, you come back. If I can, you can." There was no room in her voice for any other answer. I knelt and began setting the pages down. The first name touched the wood, and the candle nearest me bent sideways. By the 12th, frost silvered the edges of the floorboards, despite the humid storm pressing against the walls. By the 30th, I heard a wolf howl so far away it might have come from inside my own ribs. Sonia whispered, "Tell me somebody else heard that." "I heard," Miriam said. Claire's hands tightened around the journal. "Keep going." The red moon lifted behind the clouds. I felt it before I saw it. A pressure in the bones, a hunger in the air. When the clouds shifted, bloody light spilled through the broken roof and struck the silver stain at the center of the circle. Every candle flame turned blue. Miriam rose slowly. "Salt to bind," she said. The circle hissed. Iron to hold. The floor groaned beneath us. Names to call what the curse scattered. Claire opened Jonathan's journal and began reading Eleanor's marks in a language I did not understand. The words crawled under my skin anyway. They were old and bitter, shaped by a mother's grief, until grief had become a blade. My palm burned beneath the bandage. Then I heard him. Not clearly. Not with my ears. "Naima." The pages around the circle lifted at the corners. My breath caught. "Jonathan." Ruth gripped my arm. You heard him? Before I could answer, the walkie on a crate near Sonia crackled. Walter's voice broke through the static. Truck coming up the road. Miriam did not stop chanting. Sonia grabbed the tire iron with one hand, skillet still raised in the other. Miss Pearl's voice followed, sharp and furious. He ain't slowing down. Outside an engine roared, then metal screamed. The barn shook with the crash. One of the jars of silver ash rattled off its shelf, and Claire lunged, catching it against her chest before it shattered. Through the storm, Walter's truck horn blared long and low. Gloria shouted through the walkie, Walter, put him in the ditch! For half a heartbeat, hope flared. Then the north door burst inward. Patrick Cole stepped through the rain with blood running from his temple, and silver wire looped around one fist. His coat hung torn at the shoulder. Mud streaked his boots. In his other hand he carried a narrow hooked blade etched with hunter's marks that pulsed black in the moonlight. Sonia moved first. She swung the skillet with everything she had. It struck Patrick across the jaw with a sound that made my stomach twist. He staggered into the wall, teeth bared, and Sonia lifted the skillet again. I told you, she said, voice shaking with fury. Cookware. Patrick spat blood onto the floor. You have no idea what she's opening. Ruth stepped in front of me with the shotgun raised. Her face had gone hard in a way I had never seen, not even in grief. I have fed that boy, she said. That makes him family. You take one more step toward my daughter, and I will introduce you to God with buckshot in your chest. Patrick's eyes flicked from Ruth to the circle. He smiled. Not wide, not mad. Worse than that. Certain. I'm not here for her body. He snapped his wrist. Silver wire lashed across the barn like living lightning. It struck the edge of Miriam's circle and cut through salt, iron, and 3 of Jonathan's names in one bright, vicious line. Pain tore through my chest. I dropped to my knees. Ruth shouted my name. Sonia swung again, but Patrick ducked and drove his shoulder into her hard enough to send her into a stack of crates. Miriam threw salt from her bowl, and it struck Patrick's coat with a hiss. He cursed, stumbling, but the hooked blade in his hand came down toward the broken circle. Claire screamed, Do not let that touch the stain! I moved before thought caught up with me. My burned palm hit the floor. The 99 names erupted around me. Pages spun up from the boards in a storm of ash and ink, circling my body as the silver stain split open. Light poured from beneath the floor, cold, blinding, endless. The barn stretched long and wrong. Ruth's voice reached me from far away. Sonia groaned. Walter shouted outside. The shotgun fired, the blast tearing a hole through the doorframe above Patrick's head. But Patrick's blade struck the silver stain. The tether inside me nearly snapped. I screamed Jonathan's name. The light answered. Miriam grabbed my wrist. Naima, no. The circle is not sealed. Claire's face blurred behind the silver glare. If you enter now, we may not be able to pull you back. Patrick rose from the floor, one side of his face dark with blood, and dragged the silver wire tighter between his hands. I can still cut it, he rasped. The doorway in the floor widened. Inside it, something screamed. Not something. Him. I gathered the names against me as they burned and fluttered. No longer paper. Not entirely. They pressed to my coat, my arms, my throat, warm where the silver light was cold. Ruth caught my face between both hands. For 1 second, the barn, the storm, Patrick, the curse, all of it narrowed to my mother's eyes. You come home, she said. My throat closed. I'm bringing him with me. Her hands shook once before she let me go. I stepped over the broken line. Silver swallowed the barn. Sound vanished first, then rain, then the smell of smoke and wet wood. The floor dropped away, and I fell through burning white, with Jonathan's names tearing loose around me like wings. I hit nothing. I landed on my knees in a world made of silver light. It burned through my clothes, through the bandage, through the hand I threw down to catch myself. The pain was immediate and intimate, like the realm knew my body and hated that it had arrived whole. Slowly, I lifted my head. Jonathan hung before me in the endless brightness, suspended by molten wires through his wrists, ribs, throat, and chest. Blood and silver ran down his body. His shape flickered between man and wolf, beautiful and broken and trapped in agony no living thing should have survived. His eyes found mine. Terror entered them before relief could. "Naima," he said, his voice torn raw. "No." Behind him, Eleanor Ashford turned from the light. And this time, I did not wake up. Eleanor Ashford looked less like a woman in the silver between than grief given a body. Her gown drifted around her in strips of ash and old blood. Silver burned beneath her skin in thin, branching veins, and her eyes held 700 years of fire that had never gone out. Behind her, Jonathan hung in the endless white, his body broken between man and wolf, every breath dragging against the wires threaded through him. "Naima," he rasped. "Leave." I pushed myself upright. The silver light cut through my clothes and sank into my bones. It did not burn like flame. It burned like judgment. Cold. Intimate. Certain. My bandaged palm split open beneath the heat, and blood welled between my fingers. The 99 names rose around me. Pages circled my body in a slow storm, ink lifting from them like black smoke. For every slash of silver that tried to reach me, a name flared and took the wound instead. Eleanor watched them with hatred. "You brought his graves with you." "No," I said, my voice shaking only once. "I brought him." Jonathan pulled against the wires. Silver tore through his wrists, and his scream hit me in the chest so hard I almost fell. "Stop," he begged. "Naima, please. You cannot stay here." "I'm not staying." I stepped forward, and the light opened my skin in a dozen places. "I'm taking you home." Eleanor lifted one silver-stained hand. The world lashed. A blade of light struck across my shoulder and drove me to one knee. One of the pages burst into flame, and a name rang out through the white before I could speak it. Alaric Vale. The wire through Jonathan's left wrist snapped loose. He screamed like the release hurt worse than the binding. I looked at him, horrified, but he shook his head before I could stop. "Do not read them." I understood then. Every name freed him, but every freedom dragged the wound out with it. The curse had not simply tied him down. It had grown through him. Pulling him loose meant tearing it from places where pain had become part of his body. "I'm sorry," I whispered. His eyes burned silver and blue. "Do not be sorry. Run." I reached for the next page. Matthias Crow. Another wire cracked from his ribs. Silver fire spilled down his side. His body shifted violently, bones breaking into the shape of a wolf, and back again before he could even draw breath. I kept reading. Nathaniel Ashe, Samuel Reed, Caleb Wren, Elias Thorne, Gabriel Meyer. The names left my mouth like prayers and punishments both. Each one struck the silver between and shook something loose. Wires tore from his chest, from his throat, from his spine. Jonathan's screams became hoarse, then soundless, his body arching against the bright, as if the realm itself had hooked fingers into him and refused to let go. Eleanor came for me on the 37th name. She moved without walking, ash and silver rushing toward me. Her hand closed around my throat, cold enough to steal breath. The pages flared between us, but she pressed through them, her face inches from mine. "You know nothing about what he took. I know he remembers. He remembers because I made him. And did that bring her back?" Her grip tightened. For a moment, the silver between vanished. I saw smoke, a room collapsing beneath fire. A young woman on the floor, skirts soaked dark, one hand curved over her belly, Her mouth was open around a scream that had no air left inside it. A hearthstone split from heat. A child who had never cried. A mother reaching for a future already gone. Eleanor shoved the memory into me until I tasted ash. When the silver world returned, tears had burned hot down my face. "I am not telling you he was innocent," I said. "I am telling you she was not this." Eleanor's lips trembled. The pressure around my throat faltered. "You turned your daughter into a weapon," I said. "You made her death sharpen itself on him for 700 years. That was not mourning. That was not love. Do not speak to me of love. Then tell me about hers." Eleanor went still. The pages slowed around us. I swallowed against the ache in my throat. What was her name? Silver flared in Eleanor's eyes. She had no name. That is not what I asked. She died before. "What did you call her when no one heard you?" I asked. "When your hand was on your stomach and the whole world had not yet burned? What name did you give her in your heart?" Eleanor struck me. I hit the silver ground hard enough to lose breath. Jonathan snarled, the sound tearing from him half wolf, half man, and another wire snapped as he lunged toward us. "Leave her!" he roared. Eleanor looked at him. For the first time, I saw the ruins under her rage. Her mouth opened, closed. Her silver hands curled over her empty stomach, as though the child still rested there. "I never said it," she whispered. The silver between dimmed. I pushed myself up slowly. Eleanor's voice broke on the next breath. Aveline. The name did not echo. It settled, softly. Like a body finally laid down. Jonathan lifted his head. Blood and silver ran from his mouth, but he forced the words through the pain. "Aveline Ashford." The world cracked open. Not like glass. Like a chest breaking around the first breath after drowning. The endless silver light shuddered, and something warm moved through it. A small shape appeared beyond Eleanor. Not fully a child, not flesh, not ghost, but a tenderness the curse had never allowed to exist. Eleanor turned toward it with a sound so raw, I could not tell if it was grief or worship. Then she wept. The silver on her hands began to fall away in flakes of ash. "Oh, my little love," she whispered. "My Aveline." The wires around Jonathan loosened all at once. He dropped. I ran to him as he struck the silver ground. The pages burned around us, one after another, names turning sparks as the curse gave up what it had stolen. I slid my arms under his shoulders, and his skin was hot, cold, slick with blood, trembling with exhaustion. "Jonathan." His eyes found mine. He looked at me like I had crossed hell for a man he still believed should have stayed there. The last wire remained buried in his chest. It pulsed with silver light. "No," he said. I knew that tone. I had heard it in my bedroom, in my mother's yard, in every silence where he tried to turn love into distance, because distance felt safer than hope. "Do not start," I warned. His mouth shook. "Naima, if I go back, everything I did comes with me. It already did. I do not deserve. I did not come all this way to drag home a man who still thinks he belongs in a grave." He stared at me. Behind us, Eleanor sobbed over the name she had finally spoken. The silver between began falling around her in slow, white ash. I gripped Jonathan's face between my hands. "You do not have to be innocent to live. You do not have to suffer enough to make the past fair. You have to choose." His eyes closed. "I do not know how." "Yes, you do." The last wire burned brighter. I leaned closer until my forehead touched his. "Choose this life." His breath shuddered. "Not another one," I said. "Not punishment, not fire, not some grave you think you owe anybody. This one. Ruth's porch, Sonia's terrible jokes, Walter's fence, my hands. Morning. Choose it." Jonathan's hand closed weakly around my wrist. When he opened his eyes, the wolf was there. So was the man. "I choose this life," he said. The wire in his chest shattered. The silver between screamed. Eleanor turned toward us with Aveline's name still on her lips. For one heartbeat, she looked young again. Not harmless, never that, but human. Tired beyond rage. Then the child-shaped warmth reached her. Eleanor Ashford dissolved into ash and light. The curse broke beneath us. The living world tore open. I saw the barn in fragments. Rain, candles, Ruth's shotgun. Sonia on her knees with blood at her mouth. Miriam shouting over the storm. Patrick stood at the edge of the ruined circle. Silver wire tangled around both hands, his hunter's blade burning white-hot. He looked down at it. For the first time, fear changed his face. The silver fire climbed him. Not from the moon. Not from Jonathan. From the weapons he had brought to cut us apart. It ate through wire, blade, gloves, flesh. Patrick screamed and tried to throw it off, but the curse's backlash held fast. Ruth pulled Sonia back. Walter burst through the doorway. Claire covered her mouth. Then Patrick Cole vanished inside the same silver violence he had worshipped. The light swallowed everything. I fell hard onto wet boards. Air slammed into my lungs. Real air. Smoke, rain, blood, salt, burned herbs. The barn spun around me as voices shouted my name. My hands scraped across the floorboards, reaching before my eyes could focus. Jonathan lay inside the broken circle. Human. Naked. Scarred, still. For one terrible second, I thought the silver between had given me only his body. I crawled to him, slipping in rainwater and ash. No, no, Jonathan, don't you dare. His chest rose once. Barely. I pressed my shaking fingers to his face. His skin was warm beneath the blood. Warm. His fingers curled around mine. You came back, he whispered. A sob tore through me as I bent over him. No, I said, pressing my forehead to his. I went and got you. Then every scar on his body ignited silver white, and Miriam shouted for everyone to get back. The silver white fire climbed every scar on Jonathan's body. Miriam shouted for us to get back, but my hands were already on him. I had crossed a realm made of burning silver to find him. I was not about to let the living world take him from me on the barn floor. Naima, Ruth grabbed my shoulder. I'm not leaving him. Jonathan's body bowed off the boards. Light poured from the old wounds across his chest, his ribs, his throat, his wrists. For one terrified breath, I thought the curse had followed us back. Then I saw the silver rising out of him in thin, molten threads, lifting from his scars like poison drawn from a wound. Claire dropped to her knees beside Miriam. Her eyes widened behind her glasses. It's leaving him, she whispered. Do not touch the light. I am touching him, I said. Jonathan's fingers tightened around mine so hard it hurt. The silver threads broke apart above him and drifted upward as ash. Not the cruel silver ash Patrick had carried. This was softer, duller, dead. It fell across the ruined circle and vanished before it touched the floor. Jonathan dragged in a breath, then another. The fire went out all at once. His scars remained, raised and pale against his skin, but they were only scars now. Old wounds, human wounds, the sort a body could keep without being owned by them. Miriam pressed 2 fingers to his throat. Her mouth trembled before she caught it. Alive, she said. Barely, but alive. Ruth made a sound behind me that was almost a sob and almost a prayer. Sonia pushed herself upright near the crates, one hand pressed to her mouth, where blood marked her lip. I'm going to need somebody to say that again slowly, because my head got introduced to a wall. He's alive, I said. Jonathan's eyes opened halfway. He looked past Miriam, past the broken circle, straight at me. Did it hurt you? He rasped. I almost laughed. I almost broke apart. Jonathan. His gaze dropped to the burns on my hands. Did it? Not enough to make me regret it. His mouth moved like he wanted to argue, but his body had nothing left. His eyes rolled shut, and this time when he went still, his chest kept rising. Ruth threw a blanket over him with shaking hands. "Walter, stop standing there looking struck dumb and help us get this boy to the house." Walter blinked hard, then moved. No one mentioned Patrick. Outside the barn doors, rain washed the last black smear of him into the mud. For 3 days, Jonathan slept in the room that still smelled faintly of cedar, smoke, rain, and wolf. Miriam came every few hours. Claire sat with Jonathan's journals at Ruth's kitchen table until her eyes burned red with exhaustion. Sonia pretended she was fine, and then hissed every time she forgot about her bruised ribs. Ruth cooked as if hunger itself had been the enemy all along, and she intended to beat it into submission. I slept in the chair beside Jonathan's bed because leaving the room felt too much like trusting fate, and fate had never earned that from me. On the 4th morning, sunlight touched the curtains. Jonathan woke with a gasp. He jerked upright, one hand clawing at his chest, eyes wild and unfocused. For a second, he was not in Ruth's house. He was still somewhere silver, still burning. I rose slowly from the chair. "Jonathan." His head snapped toward me. The terror in his face cut deeper than any silver had. "The moon," he said. "It passed." His breathing came hard. "The fire? Gone." He looked down at his hands. He turned them over as if he expected them to split open. His wrists bore scars where the wires had been, but there was no glow, no smoke, no curse waiting beneath his skin. "It should hurt," he whispered. I sat on the edge of the bed. "Does it?" He swallowed. "No." The word seemed to frighten him more than pain would have. Ruth came in carrying a tray before he could disappear too far inside himself. Steam rose from a bowl of soup, from biscuits wrapped in a towel, from tea sweetened the way she decided people needed it. She looked at him sitting there, haunted and shirtless beneath the blanket, and her expression firmed. "Good. You're awake. Sit up properly." Jonathan stared at her. Ruth set the tray across his lap. "You died enough for 1 week. Eat." "I am not sure I can—" "You can," he obeyed. That was the first miracle I trusted. Sonia arrived 10 minutes later and checked his pulse with 2 fingers pressed dramatically to his wrist. Jonathan looked at her. "What are you doing?" "Making sure you're not a handsome ghost," she said. "We have had enough supernatural surprises." His mouth softened, not quite a smile. "Am I?" "Annoyingly alive." She squeezed his wrist once before letting go. "Keep it that way. Naima is terrible company when she's grieving." I threw a clean towel at her. She caught it and winced. "Rude to attack the injured, then stop talking." "Impossible. It's part of my healing journey." Life did not come back all at once. It returned in small, suspicious pieces. Jonathan flinched the first time moonlight crossed the floorboards. He stood in Ruth's hallway, staring at the silver rectangle of light, like it had spoken his name. I came up beside him, close enough that our shoulders touched. Nothing happened. No flame, no scream. Only ordinary moonlight lying across ordinary wood. He stared at it for a long time before stepping into it. The breath he released shook. The village began returning him to himself before he knew how to ask for it. Walter brought clothes and pretended not to see Jonathan's hands tremble when he accepted them. Miss Pearl declared him too thin in front of God and everybody. Gloria delivered pie wrapped in foil. Miriam brought salve for the burns and scolded him whenever guilt tried to replace fever. By the end of the week, he had found his way to the rescue shed behind my mother's house. I found him repairing the latch on a cage that had been sticking since spring. A young fox kit slept inside another carrier nearby, one bandaged leg stretched out, its nose tucked under its tail. Jonathan worked quietly, sleeves pushed to his forearms, silver hair tied back with a strip of leather Sonia had found and claimed made him look less tragic, but only barely. The fox kit woke and whimpered. Jonathan set down the screwdriver and crouched beside the carrier. "Easy," he murmured. The sound did something to me. I had seen him tear hunters apart. I had seen him suspended inside a silver fire. I had watched death try to claim him and fail. But seeing his large, scarred hands slide gently beneath a wounded animal, seeing the creature settle against him as if it recognized safety before he did, undid me in a quieter way. He looked up and caught me watching. What? Nothing. That has never meant nothing. It means I'm glad you're here. His expression shifted. For a moment, survival looked painful again. Then my phone rang. The call came from a woman near the old creek trail. An owl had gone down in the woods after the storm, tangled in fishing line or wire, she couldn't tell which. It was alive, but the trail had washed out and no truck could get through. I grabbed my kit before the call ended. Jonathan was already standing. "You're not cleared for heroics," I said. "I can walk. You were dead last week. I improved." I should have argued longer. Instead, 20 minutes later, my truck sat useless at the edge of the washed-out trail, while rainwater roared through the gully ahead. I cursed under my breath. Jonathan looked into the trees. "I can get you there." I knew what he meant before his eyes changed. The wolf stood just beneath his skin, quiet and waiting. My hand tightened around the strap of my medical bag. "Jonathan?" "You are not using me," he said softly. "I didn't say that. You were about to think about it." I met his eyes. "I'm not afraid of your wolf." "I know. I'm afraid of treating him like a way through the woods." His face gentled. "He wants to carry you." That stole the last of my argument. He stepped back into the shelter of the trees. The shift moved through him like moonlight through water. Bone, breath, shadow, fur. Then the white wolf stood before me, enormous and beautiful, rain silvering his coat, blue eyes fixed on mine. I climbed onto his back with more care than I had ever touched anything. His fur was thick beneath my fingers, warm despite the cold air. When he moved, power rolled under me in deep, living waves. The woods blurred around us, wet cedar, black soil, broken branches, the sharp, clean scent of storm water. I bent low, hands buried in his ruff, and for the first time in too long, fear loosened its grip. We flew. Not literally. Better. He carried me over roots and washed out earth, through dark trees and moonlit rain, with the world rushing past, and his heartbeat steady beneath my thighs. We found the owl near a split maple, one wing snarled in fishing line. It snapped its beak at me, furious and terrified. "Yeah," I whispered, pulling on my gloves. "I know. Bad night for everybody." The wolf stood between me and the dark while I worked. When the line finally came free and I eased the owl into the carrier, its wild yellow eyes blinked once before it settled. Only then did Jonathan shift back. I handed him the emergency blanket without looking away fast enough to miss the scars, the rain on his shoulders, the quiet strength of him standing alive beneath the trees. He wrapped the blanket around his waist and watched me secure the carrier. "You told a bird of prey to stop being dramatic," he said. "It listened better than you." Then he smiled. Not the careful, almost smile. Not the sad one he used when happiness frightened him. A real smile. It broke across his face slowly, uncertain and bright, and something inside me answered with such force I had to look down at the owl before I reached for him. Saving him had not been the end. It had only brought us to the place where living began. Later that night, after the owl had been settled and Ruth's house had gone quiet, a soft knock came at my bedroom door. Jonathan stood in the hallway in borrowed sweatpants, moonlight resting harmlessly across his bare chest. "Naima," he said, voice low. "Can I come in?" I knew he was asking more than that, so I opened the door wider.
Naima opened the door wider, and still I hesitated at the threshold. Moonlight lay across her bedroom floor in a quiet silver stripe. Ordinary light, harmless light. I knew that. My body did not. Every scar remembered flame before my mind remembered freedom. Naima saw the pause. She did not reach for me at once. She simply stood there in an old t-shirt and sleep shorts, her hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes steady in the dimness. "You can come in," she said. I looked at the moonlight again, and then I stepped over it. Nothing burned. The breath I released shook harder than I meant it to. Naima closed the door behind me. Bad dream. I did not sleep. That wasn't what I asked. I almost smiled. The habit of evasion had survived the curse longer than the curse itself. I kept waiting, I admitted. For what? For pain, fire, Eleanor, some proof that this was borrowed. Her expression softened, but not with pity. Never with pity. That was one of the ways she undid me. Naima looked at my ruin and refused to make it the only thing in the room. She crossed the space between us slowly. And nothing came. Her fingers brushed the back of my hand, a simple touch. It nearly brought me to my knees. Across 100 lives, touch had often meant hunger, grief, bargain, farewell. I had known desire in candlelit rooms and blood-soaked fields, in stolen hours before death found me again. But this was Naima in her bedroom in the house where her mother slept down the hall, touching me as though I was not a curse, not an alpha, not a tragedy that had wandered in from the dark. A man, present, wanted. I turned my hand and laced my fingers through hers. "If you want me to leave," I said, "tell me." Her mouth tightened. "Jonathan, I mean it. So do I." She stepped closer until the warmth of her body reached me. "I'm tired of you offering to disappear every time something feels too good to trust." The words struck with more mercy than gentleness would have. "I do not know how to be kept," I said. Naima's thumb moved over my scarred knuckles. "Then stay long enough to learn." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I bent my head and she lifted onto her toes and our mouths met in the dark. It was not careful for long. Care had carried us through blood, grief, and silver fire, but there was hunger beneath it. Hers, mine, living hunger, human hunger. I held her face between my hands and kissed her like I had been starving since the first life Eleanor took from me. Naima answered with a sound that went through my body like heat after a century of winter. Still, when her hands found the scars across my chest, I flinched. She stopped immediately. "Did I hurt you?" "No." "Jonathan." I swallowed. I thought it would hurt. Her eyes searched mine. Then she lowered her mouth to the scar above my heart and kissed it. Not the way one honored a wound. The way one claimed what had survived. Something broke in me then, but softly, not like the silver between, not like punishment, like a door giving way after being locked too long. I touched her with reverence first, then with need. Naima did not let me worship from a distance. She pulled me down with her into the bed, into warmth and into breath and skin and the fierce pulse of life beneath my hands. Every time I tried to slow for fear of taking too much, she brought me back with my name against my mouth. "Here," she whispered once, guiding my hand. "Stay here." So I did. When our bodies came together, I expected some ancient consequence to rise. I expected the universe to notice that I had dared want joy without payment. Nothing answered, only Naima. Her breath caught. Her fingers tightened in my hair. The moon moved across the floor and did not become flames. I buried my face against her throat and shook. She held me through it, not because I was breaking, because I was there. Afterward, she slept with one arm across my ribs, her leg tangled with mine as if her body had made a decision the rest of the world was not allowed to appeal. I remained awake for a long time, listening to the house. Ruth's old floorboards settling, rain dripping from the eaves. Sonia's muffled cough from the guest room she had claimed after declaring that everyone in this family needed supervision. Naima's heart beat beneath my palm. Morning came without demanding blood. That became the first thing I learned. Then the second. Ruth's kindness did not end. She did not wake and remember I was dangerous. She did not withdraw her food, her scolding, her hand on my shoulder when she passed behind my chair. She fed me eggs and toast and told me I had the appetite of a haunted broomstick. "I have eaten," I said. "You have nibbled. There is a difference." Sonia looked up from her coffee. "Don't argue. She once bullied a fever out of me with soup." Ruth pointed her fork at her. "And you lived." "Against my will, but yes." Sonia's fear had changed shape too. It no longer stood between us like a blade. She teased because she had decided I would remain. She complained when I lifted something heavy, stole the last biscuit from my plate and checked my pulse only once more before declaring, "Fine, still not a ghost, extremely inconvenient." Walter brought me work gloves and said the fence near the back pasture leaned again. "It does not," Naima said. Walter shrugged. "Might someday." So I fixed it. The wolf remained with me while I worked beneath the sun. He moved under my skin when the wind carried deer scent through the field, when the woods called at dusk, when Naima laughed from the rescue shed and every instinct in me turned toward her. But the old command was gone. No pack cried out for me. No throne of teeth and blood waited beyond the trees. No ancient debt pulled me toward war. For the first time since my first death, the wolf inside me was only himself. Powerful, wild, mine. And when I chose the shape of a man, he did not rage at the prison of bone. He rested. Humanity had once felt like punishment, a fragile cage between deaths, a disguise I wore until the moon reminded me what I was. Now it felt like bread warm from Ruth's oven, like Walter's tools in my hands, like Sonia saying my name without flinching, like Naima asleep beside me, trusting me with the softest hours of her life. I chose North Buxton in pieces, the porch at dawn, the rescue shed with its injured birds and stubborn raccoons. Ruth's kitchen, Naima's bed, mornings. Weeks passed and peace stopped feeling like a trap only when I was not looking at it directly. One evening I watched Naima in the yard while the sun dropped red behind the trees. She stood with Ruth and Sonia near the porch steps, laughing at something Miss Pearl had said from the fence line. The sound reached me where I stood beneath the maple, and the wanting that rose in me was not old hunger, it was quieter, more dangerous. I wanted to be asked about dinner plans. I wanted to know which side of the bed she would steal. I wanted winters, arguments, grocery lists, muddy boots by the door. I wanted to age in the same house as her if time allowed a wolf such mercy. I wanted to put a vow into the world that had nothing to do with eternity. Eternity had been a curse. I wanted one human life with her. That night after Naima fell asleep, I went downstairs. Ruth sat at the kitchen table with tea cooling beside her and a ledger open under her hand. She looked up before I spoke as if she had been waiting. "You all right, Jonathan?" I stood in the doorway like a man facing judgment and blessing in the same breath. "No," I said, "but I hope to be." Ruth closed the ledger. I stepped into the kitchen, my heart striking harder than it had in the silver between. "I need to ask you something," I said. Her eyes narrowed, not unkindly. I drew one breath, then another. "I want your blessing," I said. "I want to ask Naima to marry me."
Jonathan had not proposed beneath a perfect sky. He had done it in the rescue shed, with rain tapping on the tin roof and an angry raccoon recovering in the corner cage. I had smelled antiseptic, cedar shavings, wet earth, and him. He had stood there with his silver hair loose around his face, looking more frightened of a small velvet box than he had ever looked of death. The ring had been my grandmother's. A narrow gold band, a dark red stone at its center. Ruth had given it to him after making him promise, in her kitchen, that if he ever tried to love me like suffering was noble, she would straighten him out before God and everybody. Jonathan had told me that part with absolute seriousness. Then he had gone down on one knee. I had 100 lives forced on me, he had said, voice rough. I only wanted one chosen life. If you would have me, Naima Bell, I wanted that life to be with you. I had said yes before he finished breathing. That had been nearly a year before the wedding. Enough time had passed for healing to become something other than survival. Jonathan had stopped flinching every time moonlight crossed a wall. Ruth had stopped watching me like grief might drag me under if she blinked too long. Sonia had stopped pretending she only came by to supervise, and admitted she liked having all of us close enough to annoy. When I realized our wedding date would fall beneath the blood full moon, I almost changed it. Jonathan had taken the calendar from my hand. No, he had said quietly, that night does not get to belong only to death, so we married under it. Ruth's bedroom smelled of roses, pressed linen, and the shea butter she had rubbed into my shoulders that morning, because her hands needed something to do. Sonia stood behind me, fighting with the clasp of my necklace and losing the battle against her own tears. I was not crying, she said. You had mascara on your thumb. That was evidence from an unrelated emotional crime. Ruth made a soft sound that was almost laughter. Then she turned me toward the mirror. For a moment, I did not recognize the woman looking back. My hair had been pinned with gold combs that had belonged to my grandmother. The dress was simple, ivory satin and lace, fitted close enough that I could feel every nervous breath I took. The ring on my hand caught the light like a small, steady ember. Ruth came up behind me and rested both hands on my arms. Baby, she whispered, you do not have to be strong today either. I looked at her in the mirror. This time, when my eyes filled, I let them. I know, I said. Outside, Miss Pearl was already judging the seating arrangements like heaven had appointed her over chairs. Gloria followed her with tissues and a warning not to start trouble before the vows. Walter stood near the aisle in a suit that made him look both proud and deeply uncomfortable. Miriam watched everything with her quiet, knowing eyes. And Jonathan waited beneath the maple tree, not as an alpha, not as a curse, not as something dragged out of legend and blood. Just Jonathan Baker, silver-haired, scarred, beautiful, and alive. Ruth walked beside me down the yard, not giving me away, walking me forward, into another room of my life. Jonathan saw me and forgot how to hide. His face opened completely. Every careful wall in him fell, and what remained was wonder so raw it hurt to look at. By the time I reached him, his eyes were wet. Sonia made a strangled noise behind me. I am still not crying, she whispered. Jonathan took my hands. His thumbs moved over my knuckle, as though he had to remind himself I was real. When it came time for vows, he looked at me like the rest of the yard had disappeared. Naima Bell, he said, voice low and shaking. I came to you as a wound with teeth. You cut me free anyway. I had 100 names, and most of them were given to me by grief. I wanted only this one, spoken by you. Husband, yours, alive. He swallowed hard. I could not promise forever. Forever had been cruel to me. So I promised mornings. I promised truth when guilt tempted me into silence. I promised to come home from the dark, even if the dark knew my name. I promised this life. My hands tightened around his. Jonathan Baker, I said, I found you in a snare, and then in a curse, and then in a place no living woman was meant to walk. I loved you before you believed you could stay. I promised the man and the wolf, the scars and the quiet, the teeth and the tenderness. I promised to remind you that love was not punishment, and if you ever tried to turn it into a grave again, I promised to drag you back to the porch myself. His mouth trembled. I promised this life. When he kissed me, the whole yard erupted. Ruth cried openly. Sonia denied sobbing while sobbing. Miss Pearl announced that at least the kiss had been properly passionate. Walter clapped too hard. Miriam smiled like she had been waiting 700 years to see one cursed man finally become only a husband. The celebrations spilled into evening with food, music, lanterns, and laughter. Jonathan danced with me beneath strings of golden lights, his hand warm at the small of my back. Every time someone called him my husband, his expression shifted like the word was still too sacred to trust. Then the moon rose. Red light touched the yard. The music faltered first, then the conversations. Forks lowered. Glasses paused halfway to mouths. Even the crickets seemed to lose their nerve. Jonathan's hand stilled on my waist. For one terrible heartbeat, the past stood among us again. The barn, the silver ash, Patrick's scream, Eleanor's grief, Jonathan burning in a place made of endless white. He looked at me. I knew what he almost asked. "No," I said. "You do not stand there alone." He did not argue. That was how I knew he had healed. We walked to the center of the yard together. The blood-full moon hung above North Buxton, swollen and red, watching him the way it had watched all his deaths. Jonathan lifted his face to it. His scars held their ordinary shape. No silver opened. No flame crawled beneath his skin. No curse reached down. The moonlight passed over him like light and nothing more. A sound moved through the yard. Not cheering. Not yet. Just breath returning to bodies that had forgotten how to breathe. Jonathan looked down at our joined hands. Then he laughed. It broke out of him softly, disbelieving and bright. Sonia wiped both cheeks and muttered, "I swear to God, if that moon had tried something, I would have fought it." Ruth pressed one hand to her mouth and cried harder. Walter cleared his throat. "About damn time." Then the music started again. Later, after the lanterns burned low and the last guests drifted home, Jonathan and I sat on Ruth's porch. My head rested against his shoulder. His wedding band lay warm beneath my fingers. Somewhere beyond the trees an owl called into dark. The wolf inside him stirred. Not cursed. Not hunted. Not ruling anything. Just alive. Jonathan turned his face into my hair and whispered, "Do you believe it?" I looked at the red moon fading over the fields. There was no next life waiting for him anymore. No curse, no fire, no moon hungry enough to take him from me. There was only this life, and this life was ours. The house had gone quiet, but my body had not. Music still lived under my skin. Laughter clung to the walls. The scent of candle smoke, roses, wine, and rain-damp grass followed us down the hallway, as Jonathan held my hand like he feared the dark might still reach between our fingers and take one of us. It did not. Nothing did. Ruth had kissed my cheek before letting us go, her eyes wet and fierce. "Go on, baby," she whispered. "Go be happy." Sonia had stood behind her, with both arms crossed, mascara ruined, trying and failing to look unaffected. "I expect absolutely no details," she had said. Then after half a breath, "Unless they're flattering to everyone involved." Jonathan had blinked at her. I laughed so hard my ribs hurt. Now the bedroom door closed behind us, and the laughter faded into something deeper. The room was lit by 2 lamps and the last red wash of the blood-full moon through the curtains. Roses sat in a chipped blue vase on the dresser. Someone, Ruth probably, had turned down the bed and left a folded quilt at the foot of it. My wedding dress whispered around my legs when I turned. Jonathan stood near the door, still in his suit, still too beautiful to be fair. His silver hair had come loose from the ribbon at his nape. His wedding band caught the lamplight when his hand flexed at his side. He looked at me as if I were both a miracle and danger. "Are you afraid?" I asked. His throat moved. "Yes." I crossed the room slowly. "Of me?" "Never." "Then what?" His eyes flicked toward the window, toward the moonlight laid across the floor like a blade that had forgotten how to cut. "I was happy," he said quietly. "All night. I kept waiting for punishment to follow it." My chest tightened. I reached for him, but I did not pull him close. "Not yet," I laid my palm over his heart and felt it beating hard beneath his shirt. No fire came. No. No curse opened. No. No moon took you from me. His hand covered mine. No. Then stay here, I whispered. With me. In this room. In this body. In this life. His eyes closed, and the breath that left him sounded wounded. When he opened them again, something had changed. Not healed completely. Not erased, but chosen. He lifted my hand and pressed his mouth to my wedding ring. My wife, he said. The word went through me like heat. I stepped closer until my dress brushed his shoes. Say it again. His gaze darkened. My wife. I rose onto my toes and kissed him. For a moment he was gentle, almost careful enough to break my heart. His mouth moved over mine, as though he was asking permission with every breath. I gave it to him in the way I kissed him back, in the way my hand slid into his hair, in the way I pulled him down instead of letting him hover above wanting. He made a rough sound against my mouth. Then the carefulness cracked. His arms came around me, strong and shaking. He kissed me deeper, hungrier, like the vows had only sharpened what had been waiting all day beneath his skin. I felt the wolf in him then, not as threat, not as curse, but as heat, instinct, devotion. His hands pressed to my back, then stilled at the fastenings of my dress. He drew away just enough to look at me. May I? That almost undid me more than hunger would have. Yes, I said. Jonathan, yes. His fingers were not steady. Each button slipped free slowly, one by one, pearl after pearl. His breath warmed the side of my neck. The dress loosened by degrees, and with every inch of fabric he opened, the air between us changed. It became heavier, closer, sacred in a way no church could have held. When the dress finally slid down my body, he caught it before it hit the floor, as if even that deserved tenderness. I stood before him in lace and moonlight, and the gold combs still pinned in my hair. He stared, not greedily, wonderingly, like I had walked out of grief alive and married him. Naima, he whispered. My name in his mouth had always been dangerous. Tonight, it was devastating. I reached for his jacket and pushed it from his shoulders. He let it fall. Then I loosened his tie, slowly, watching the pulse jump in his throat. His shirt came next, button after button, scar after scar. There he was, the man after the fire. Silver marks crossed his chest and ribs, old wounds made quiet at last. I touched them, and he flinched, not away from me, but away from memory. I bent and kissed the scar over his heart. His hand came to the back of my head. Do not worship my wounds, he said, voice strained. I looked up at him. I'm not. No, no. I kissed him again, lower, softer, where the curse had once tried to write ownership into his skin. I'm loving what survived. His face broke open. He pulled me to him then, and there was nothing distant left in the way he touched me. We went to the bed in pieces, kissing, stumbling, laughing once when my foot caught in the fallen dress, then losing the laughter when his mouth found mine again. The mattress dipped beneath us. For a while, there was only touch. His hands taught me as if he had all the time in the world, and still could not bear to waste a second. My hands traced the hard lines of his shoulders, the strength in his arms, the scars along his back. He trembled under tenderness. I trembled under wanting. Whenever he tried to pull himself back into restraint, I brought him closer. Do not disappear on me, I whispered. His forehead pressed to mine. I am trying not to. Try harder. A breathless laugh escaped him, dark and broken and beautiful. Then his mouth was on my throat, my shoulder, the place where my heartbeat answered him. Heat built between us slowly, then all at once. I had imagined this night with fear folded into every fantasy, fear that joy would be interrupted, that his body would burn, that mine would wake alone. But there was no fear strong enough to survive the way he looked at me. When he held himself above me, his hair falling around us like silver thread, I touched his face. "My husband," I said. His eyes burned. Again. "My husband." His control fractured. He loved me like a man who had finally stopped apologizing for being alive. There was tenderness, yes, but there was hunger too. Real hunger. Human hunger. His body moved with mine, and the room filled with breath, heat, whispered names, the soft strike of rain against the glass. I held onto him and felt every barrier between grief and pleasure fall away. The moonlight crossed his back. Nothing burned. He saw me notice. For one suspended second, we both went still. Then he laughed once, low and disbelieving, and buried his face against my neck. "No fire," I whispered. "No fire. Only us." His mouth found mine again. Only us. Afterward, he held me so tightly, I could feel his heart slowing against mine. My ring rested against his shoulder. His hand moved over my hair with a wonder that made my throat ache. "Was it different?" I asked softly. He did not pretend not to understand. "Yes." "How?" He was quiet for a long moment. Before, even joy felt borrowed. His fingers brushed my cheek. Tonight felt kept. I turned into his touch and kissed his palm. Good. His eyes moved over my face, dark and warm, and still hungry beneath the tenderness. "Naima?" "Yes." A small, dangerous smile touched his mouth. "Stay awake with me a little longer." I smiled back, already reaching for him. "Come here, husband." He did. And before dawn, when the rain had stopped and the moon had finally slipped beyond the trees, I woke to find him dressed only halfway, kneeling beside an open suitcase I had not packed. I pushed myself up on one elbow. "Jonathan." He looked over his shoulder, silver hair loose, wedding ring bright on his hand. Then he smiled. "Get dressed, wife," he said. "I am stealing you before anyone wakes." Jonathan stole me before sunrise. He had packed my bag badly. I found 2 dresses, 3 pairs of underwear, 1 boot, my toothbrush, and the silk robe Sonia had bought me with a note folded inside the sleeve. Hydrate. I mean that sincerely and disrespectfully. S. I had laughed so hard in the passenger seat that Jonathan glanced over, alarmed. "What?" I held up the note. His eyes moved over it. Then he looked back at the empty road, both hands tightening on the wheel. "Your friend had no shame. She had plenty. She just ignored it." Dawn bled slowly over the highway. North Buxton slipped behind us, still sleeping under wet trees in the exhausted hush after celebration. My dress hung in Ruth's spare room. My bouquet sat in a vase on her kitchen table. My mother had not come to the door when we left, but the porch light had been on, and there had been a covered basket waiting on the steps. Biscuits, fried chicken, strawberries, 2 pieces of wedding cake wrapped in wax paper. Ruth Bell's blessing, packed in butter and sugar. Jonathan had carried the basket to the car like it was holy. Now his wedding ring flashed whenever the sun caught his hand. I could not stop looking at it. That small circle of gold had changed something in me. Not ownership, not completion. Something quieter and more dangerous. Proof. He was here. He was mine. He had no next life waiting to steal him away. "Where are we going?" I asked. "You will see." That was not an answer. It was the only answer you were getting. I reached across the console and slid my hand over his thigh. The car swerved half an inch. "Naima." I smiled at the warning in his voice. "Yes, husband?" His jaw tightened. His eyes stayed on the road, but heat moved through the air between us so quickly, it felt like the morning itself had leaned closer. "You enjoyed saying that. I enjoyed what it did to you." A rough breath left him. "You were going to make this drive difficult." "I was planning to make the whole honeymoon difficult." His mouth curved, slow and wicked. "Good." We stopped once for coffee at a gas station outside Perry Sound. Jonathan bought black coffee, cinnamon buns, peaches from a roadside stand, and a map he did not need. The woman behind the counter stared at him too long, then looked at me, then at the ring on my hand. "Congratulations," she said, smiling like she had just witnessed a secret. "Thank you," I said. Jonathan looked almost shy. That nearly killed me. By late morning, the highway narrowed into roads lined with pine, granite, and dark water flashing through the trees. The air changed first. It came colder through the cracked window, carrying lake wind, cedar, damp stone, and something clean enough to hurt. Georgian Bay opened in pieces beyond the forest, silver blue and endless, beneath a sky scraped bright by rain. The cabin waited at the end of a private road. It was cedar-sided, low-roofed, and built into a slope of stone above the water. Pines crowded close around it. A path ran down toward a narrow shore where waves struck the rocks with steady, patient force. There were no neighboring cottages in sight. No voices. No engines. No watching eyes. Jonathan parked and killed the engine. For a moment, neither of us moved. Silence wrapped around us. Not the frightened silence of hiding. The chosen kind. I looked at him. "You did this?" "I wanted somewhere no one needed anything from you." He turned toward me, silver hair falling loose around his face. "No hunters. No curse. No village trying not to stare. No moon waiting to punish me. And what exactly did you plan for us to do out here?" His gaze dropped to my mouth, then lower, then back to my eyes. "Eat," he said. "Sleep. Walk by the water. Let the wolf run." His voice roughened. "Touch my wife until she forgets every prayer she made over my grave." The words entered me like a match dropped into oil. I did not answer. I got out of the car. He was around the hood before I had both feet on the gravel. His hands found my waist, and the next thing I knew, my back was against the warm metal of the car, and his mouth was on mine. There was nothing careful in it. Care had belonged to fear. This was hunger. His hands shook when they held me, but not from dread. Mine twisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, closer, until there was no room left between us for grief, or ghosts, or old silver flame. The bay crashed behind him. Pine needles whispered overhead. The world smelled like rain and heat and freedom. "We have a cabin," I whispered against his mouth. "I know. There is a bed in it. I know." "Then move." He laughed, dark and breathless, and lifted me as if I weighed nothing. Bossy wife. Obedient husband. His eyes flashed gold. "Do not test me unless you mean to finish it." "I married you," I said. "I meant to finish everything." We barely made it inside. The cabin door struck the wall. My shoes came off somewhere near the entryway. His jacket landed over a kitchen chair. The basket of food was abandoned on the counter, forgotten beneath the smell of biscuits and strawberries. He carried me through cedar shadows and squares of sunlight until my back met the bedroom door, and his mouth found the pulse beating hard in my throat. The room blurred around us. Quilt, window, lake light. His ring against my skin, my hands in his hair, his body pressed close and real and alive. We were not quiet. There had been too many years of silence in him, too many nights when pleasure had been turned into a trap, too many lives where wanting anything meant losing it. He loved me like he was done apologizing to the universe. I answered him the same way, without shame, without gentleness where gentleness would have lied, with nails, teeth, laughter, breathless curses, and my name breaking in his mouth, like he had been starving for the right to say it. Afterward, we lay tangled across the bed with the windows open, and the bay wind moving over our damp skin. Jonathan's head rested against my chest. His hair spilled over me like moonlight. "You are smiling," I said. "I am not." "You are." His mouth curved against me. Then I was unaware of it. "That makes it worse." He lifted his head. His eyes were softer than I had ever seen them. "I kept waiting for pain," he admitted. The words cooled the room. I touched his cheek. And? His hand moved over my hip, slow and reverent. None came. I leaned down and kissed him. Then eat something before my mother somehow senses you neglecting yourself from 3 hours away. We ate on the floor by the fireplace, wedding cake with our fingers, fried chicken cold from the basket, strawberries so ripe they stained Jonathan's lips red. He licked sugar from his thumb and caught me watching. What? He asked. Nothing. His smile turned dangerous again. Liar. The shower took longer than it needed to. Steam filled the small bathroom until the mirror disappeared. Water ran over the old scars on his back, over the places silver had once opened him. I washed him slowly, and he stood there with his forehead against mine, eyes closed, letting himself be cared for without trying to earn it. Then his hands were in my hair, water pouring around us, his mouth on mine, and the cabin once again became a place where the living proved they were alive. We slept through the afternoon. When I woke up, sunlight had turned amber on the walls. Jonathan was not beside me. For one blind second, terror rose so fast I could not breathe. Then I heard him outside. A low, playful growl. I wrapped myself in the sheet and went to the window. The white wolf stood on the shore below, enormous against the dark rocks, his fur bright in the dying sun. He looked back at the cabin as if he had known exactly when I would wake. Show off. I dressed quickly and followed the path down. He waited until I was close, then bounded away, paws striking stone, tail high. I chased him and cursed him and laughed until my lungs burned. He circled back, bumped his shoulder against my thigh, and nearly knocked me into the moss. Jonathan Baker, if you ruin my honeymoon by making me break an ankle, the wolf sneezed. I pointed at him. Do not mock me. He shifted behind a screen of pines and came back human, bare-chested, barefoot, and entirely too pleased with himself. I would carry you, he said. You would feel guilty. I would feel useful. Not the same thing. His smile faded a little because he knew I was right. I stepped close and pressed my palm over his heart. You do not have to be useful to be loved. The lake wind moved between us. His throat worked. I was learning, he said. I know. He bent and kissed me softly this time, the kind of kiss that did not demand, the kind that stayed. We walked until dusk settled purple over the bay. We bought nothing, saw no one, needed no one. Back at the cabin, he cooked eggs badly and burned toast worse. I ate both because he looked proud, and because the sight of him barefoot in a kitchen, cursing at a frying pan, felt more miraculous than any broken curse. Night fell clean and cold. We left the curtains open. The moon rose white above the bay. Ordinary. Jonathan stood at the window for a long time, staring at it as if he still expected it to remember him. I came up behind him and wrapped my arms around his waist, pressing my cheek to the warm strength of his back. It is only light now, I whispered. His hands covered mine. For a while, he said nothing. Then his shoulders dropped, slow and careful, as if some final invisible weight had slipped from him and fallen soundlessly to the floor. For the first time in 700 years, he said, I believe that. I kissed the scar beneath his shoulder blade. No fire. No fire, he repeated. No death. His fingers tightened around mine. No death. No curse. He turned in my arms and looked down at me, silver hair loose around his face, wedding ring bright in the moonlight. No curse, he said. I smiled. Only your wife. His mouth curved, soft and wicked at once. Only my wife. We went back to bed with the curtains open and the moon watching without power. We ate the last piece of wedding cake beneath the sheets, laughing when crumbs scattered across the quilt. Jonathan tried to brush them away, then gave up when I pulled him down to me. There was no hurry that night. No fear hiding under our breath. No countdown. No tomorrow waiting with teeth. There was only his hand on my hip, my ring against his chest, his mouth warm against my shoulder, and the deep, steady beat of his heart under my palm. Alive. Still alive. Mine. When sleep finally came, it did not come like surrender. It came like trust. I woke once before dawn and found him sleeping beside me, one arm heavy across my waist, his face peaceful in a way I'd never seen before. Not guarded, not haunted, not braced for punishment. Just peaceful. Outside, the bay moved against the rocks. The trees shifted in the wind. The moon faded. Nothing came for him. Nothing came for us. I closed my eyes and curled closer to my husband, smiling against his skin as morning waited quietly beyond the glass. For once, the world did not ask us to survive it. It simply let us live.
If you stay, I watch the sun fade into the night, still hoping somehow you'd find your way. Every little dream still carried your name, even when the world begged me to walk away. If love was enough to turn back time, I'd hold your hand through every storm. No matter how far tomorrow runs, my heart will always lead me home. If you stay, don't let go. Stay, please don't say goodbye. Not tonight, hold me close one more time. If you stay, I'm still here. Stay, don't leave me. Love me through the darkest night. Don't disappear. Stay, please stay. Maybe forever was never promised. Maybe we only borrowed time, but every heartbeat still whispered softly that your soul was always meant for mine. If tomorrow steals you from